Welcome everybody back into Nerd Sesh. As always, I'm Carson Brabber, and alongside me is Logan Camden, and today we are going to be answering all of your questions. That's right, baby. It's a mailbag episode, and you guys asked a bunch of questions, a lot about the NBA, some about the NFL, and some sort of miscellaneous stuff that we'll get to at the end. But since it is All-Star Weekend, Logan, we are going to start with the only question we actually had about the All-Star events, and it's not even a question, it's a statement. So this is the only statement that we will be responding to today. But Bexar Bagel says, Stephon Castle was robbed, Mac only won because of props. Do you agree with that, Logan? And what were your thoughts overall on All-Star Weekend?
Not at all. I thought Mac deservedly won and repeated. Mac's one of the greatest dunkers I've ever seen. And also on top of that, I had some people were asking just about Mac's game in general that I was watching with, and I've watched a lot of Mac in the G League. I legitimately think that Mac McClung is like deserving of an opportunity to get rotational minutes. Like, I think he could be a backup point guard in this league, and like, one, I think he would just be good and efficient with his minutes, but two, I mean, I think he'd just fire you up if he was off your bench. Like, you just see a little white dude flying through the air off the baseline and he jams something. Like, I think Mac's a really good point guard, and I kind of hate that his gimmick is just like he's the dunk guy. You know what I mean? Because I do think he's a good basketball player and deserves a shot. But I really enjoyed this year, Carson, the All-Star game and the format. I like that. I think players are incentivized a little bit more to play a little harder, right? Guys aren't going to go full hard, like, because it's the All-Star game. You don't want to get injured. Pause. Hey, yo.
Oh, my.
Hey, yo.
Yeah. That's not the sort of program that we're talking about here, Logan. This is the All-Star game.
I did enjoy the games this time. I enjoyed the format to 40 points. Like, I thought the young guys had an opportunity to win there for a minute before the OGs slammed the door. My only complaint, God damn, there were so many advertisements, though, man. Like, the games were just so broken up. I enjoy that format because I play a lot of pickup basketball, and I just generally, like, even if I'm just at the gym and I'm not on the spot, I enjoy just watching five random guys play ball. So watching these guys in a little bit more of a laid-back format, watching them play that kind of pickup style, I enjoyed it. I would have just enjoyed it more if it wasn't such a soulless cash grab and husk of an event. That was my only issue with it. Was I like basketball. I am a hooper. I like watching basketball. I don't like watching Kevin Hart dick around and joke around, and I don't need to hear Kevin Hart and Shaq's thoughts about. Honestly, I enjoyed them roasting each other. It reminded me of my lunch table days back at school, but it was just too much like pomp and circumstance, man. I want to watch these guys play ball.
I feel like that's definitely the biggest consensus complaint, and I totally agree with it. Like, there's just no need for the entire All-Star broadcast to go on for 3 hours when there's 40 total minutes of basketball played. We don't need all of these intermission events. We don't need, in my opinion, the Mr. Beast challenge. Get Mr. Beast off my screen.
I don't know, man. That shit was kind of hype. That was kind of hype.
Okay, but then, like, put it with the skills challenge or something. I just don't think we need so many little breaks interrupting the complete flow of the All-Star game.
Tell me what you think, because I agree with that. I think three-point contest, dunk contest, right? You can have it on the same night. Do whatever you want to do with that. And if you want, maybe have, right, because there's a lot of events to get through. The celebrity game, which I don't really care about, but it's a cool event, right? Mm-hmm. Three-point dunk on one night. And, yeah, have the Mr. Beast challenge. I don't get why this wasn't like you said, 3 hours. Why didn't we dedicate an hour to this and just knock the games out? Or if you need that many ad breaks, an hour and a half. Like, it just didn't need to be so drawn out.
And it's so greedy, especially when you know that, like, people are already somewhat frustrated with the All-Star product, and that's why you're attempting these sort of sweeping changes. That's why you totally altered the format to this tournament and apparently had a sit-down talk with the All-Star players before the game saying, like, hey, we need you to compete in this. Like, you understand that you are in a position where you feel like you need to put the best product forward, and then you go out there and it's so oversaturated with ads and nonsense. And frankly, I'm not a big fan of the tournament format. Now, I like the idea of having, like, the themed teams. Like, I think if they were going to do this format, it was fun that we got basically an international team and a young guys team and an OGs team. That's cool. Do I think that we need to have the Rising Stars representatives there? It's fun that they ended up playing a competitive game, but like there's just such a drop off in terms of the draw that those guys are at this point, the literal level of basketball ability. I would be more inclined to see a return to the classic 2-team format, but trying to find a way to theme those teams that maybe we are at a point in a couple of years. You can just do a fully international versus American squad, or you do like a quote unquote global team that has like 3 or 4 Americans on it to fill out the roster, which isn't perfect, but you don't just abandon the conventional format of we are only letting the 24 All-Stars on the floor and we're just going to play a normal basketball game, but you do it in a way where there is some sort of prideful aspect. You feel like you're at least playing for some sort of identity. I don't think that there's a way to just make the All-Star game some incredible product, but I also think that like this is so far down in terms of the hierarchy of things that matter to me about the NBA that I do feel like it's kind of silly that there is so much criticism and panic over All-Star Weekend. Like, it's the All-Star game, man. I think that this is another instance of nostalgia blinding people, making people think that the All-Star game in the past was
People
sensational.
just like being upset about shit, man.
People love being upset. I do think that the All-Star game specifically has taken a bit of a step back in terms of the competitiveness, but I think that people really do overstate that fact. And I thought overall, this All-Star Weekend was pretty fun, man. The 3-point contest has gone from something that was like super weird kind of in its early years, just not that compelling, to now maybe my favorite event because dudes are just that ridiculously good. The dunk contest, I think, was really fun. I think the final was great. I think that Mac versus Castle was the best duel that we've had in a few years. I do think that Mac deserved it. I thought Castle was great. I thought he was creative, but Mac literally put forth a 50 dunk every time.
It was perfect. It was a perfect dunk contest.
It was a perfect dunk contest. So even if you think that Castle had 250 dunks in the final, which I'd be good with, how are you going to tell me that Mac didn't also have 250 dunks? And if you need a tiebreaker, how about the fact that in the opening round, Mac's dunks were amazing. He jumped over the Kia, right? He was doing phenomenal stuff, whereas Castle was like very sort of mediocre in the opening round, and then he locked in for the final. I do think that Mac is a phenomenal, phenomenal dunker, and I think that he's one of the best parts of All-Star Weekend year over year. So I thought that it was solid. I thought it was a solid All-Star Weekend. Me personally, I prefer like an average Tuesday night in the NBA to All-Star Weekend, and it's just always been that way. I love the basketball. I'm here to watch the basketball. I don't necessarily care as much about the gimmicks and the shenanigans that we see on All-Star Weekend, but I certainly don't think that it needs to be this whole thing of people freaking out about the All-Star product, for God's sakes. All I can say is NBA, don't oversaturate us with ads. Don't be so greedy. Just put the basketball first.
I actually kind of liked the All-Star Game format personally. I liked the tournament format, and I actually kind of liked the Rising Stars team edition as well, just because I felt like there was a more of a competitive atmosphere in that game against the OGs. Obviously, they just ended up running away with it there at the end, but there was I don't know, that the younger guys were playing harder than the older guys, and there was a bit of a competitive edge that I haven't had in a while in the All-Star Game that I enjoyed. The one thing that I've seen a lot of people suggesting is how the MLB All-Star Game does it to incentivize players to play harder, right, making that be the determinant for a Game 7 in the NBA Finals. What do you think about that idea?
It's not a great one, in my opinion, because how many players are really going to be incentivized by that? Like 2 on each team? Think about it. If we're expecting a Celtics versus Thunder Finals, then that's 4 total All-Stars, and those guys are going to get screwed over because some other schmuck doesn't care enough to compete because he's like, I'm not going to be in the finals. I just think it would be putting too much stake into a game that doesn't need to be that important.
I think I agree with that, and honestly, I kind of hope they run this format back with the tournament. They just run it back with less ads because I'll be honest, it was hard to... It was hard not to flip the channel when they kept going to commercial break after somebody hit 15 points or somebody hit 20 points. And I'm like, damn, dude, like is this worth my time? You know what I mean? The NBA needs to make it worthwhile for the fans. And this is my favorite, All-Star break I think I've had in a long time. It was the most entertained I've been in a while. So I think it's a step in the right direction. I hope they keep building on this, and I hope they aren't as greedy. And last thing. It's hard to make the dunk contest any better just because we all saw the greatest one of all time between Levine and Gordon. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it was incredible.
That is a nostalgia one where I think it's hard to get better than that, you know?
But dude, we saw some real innovation. Castle's dunk off the make, never seen that. That was really cool. Mac patting the rim on his way up. Some of the things that Mac did just to show his hang time, bro. And then when he sort of recreated the AG dunk of going over top the dude and then turning in the air, like his hang time is completely absurd.
Mean, we need
and then
to have
upgrading Blake's Kia dunk. He did a lot of crazy shit.
Nothing against Mac, because I thought Mac balled out like he always did. We just need to field 4 guys who can actually yam. Like,
for sure. Because Buzelis and Andre Jackson didn't need to be there.
Dude. They
just didn't need to be there. And, like, that's been the complaint about the All-Star game for years and years, is that we don't have the real stars doing it. Like, if Ja and
we don't
Ant
need
were to
stars.
do it, that would
we
be
just
amazing.
need dudes with balance, man.
But stars would be sick. I mean, back in the day, it was Neek and it was MJ and it was Clyde. And you really did have the faces of the league doing it. That would be awesome. But I still think it's pretty fucking cool when Mac McClung is out there doing the shit he's doing and Castle was putting on a performance like he did. The thing that annoys me most about All-Star Weekend discourse is when people try to act like it is some way reflective of the state of the league today, the deterioration of the competitiveness in basketball, which is just an NBA media thing because NBA mainstream media truly is the worst, so much more negative, so much more self-loathing than any other sports media. But, like, think about the Pro Bowl. The Pro Bowl isn't even football anymore. It's completely unwatchable. Nobody even nobody looks at that and says, this is what's wrong with the NFL. Like, All-Star Weekend is still enjoyable. The Pro Bowl is nonsense. I haven't turned on a Pro Bowl in at least a decade. So that
I'll catch the highlights on YouTube, but I'm not going out of my way to watch the Pro Bowl.
I don't even catch the highlights on YouTube. It's ridiculous. And I get it. The All-Star game has historically been better. It has way more iconic moments, but it's about the weekend. I thought that the weekend was pretty solid this time around. Okay, now let's get into the actual basketball. Nikola Aesthetic asks what was by far the most liked reply. So clearly the people want to hear our answer to this one. If SGA had 30, 13, and 10 on 57, 45, 82 splits and the highest all-time PER and BPM in a game off the second seed, and Jokic was in SGA's statistical positions, who do you think would be the MVP favorite?
I think both have such great cases. That's what makes this so difficult. Is it's like I really at this point have no issue with people who say SGA is the MVP or Jokic is the MVP. If I'm being honest with you, I think SGA, if we're putting him in Jokic's shoes, would probably be MVP. I do think voter fatigue has a lot to do with why Jokic isn't getting as much buzz this year, but I just think that's really disingenuous to SGA's case because he's made such a phenomenal one this year, considering the circumstances that this team's been so great without their second best player. I think they're both all-time MVP cases, but if this was a level playing ground with no voter fatigue, so to speak, I think Jokic would probably be the front runner right now.
So the way that I kind of like to view this is instead of literally just like flipping their stat lines, let's just flip the history of MVP voting, because to me it's just too weird to pretend that like SGA would have Jokic's stats and vice versa, because then we're just changing who they are as basketball players. Let's imagine the difference is instead of Jokic having won 3 of the last 4 MVPs, SGA has won 3 of the last 4 MVPs. So we're just measuring the voter fatigue, and Jokic hasn't won a single MVP in this theoretical world. If that were the case, I do think that Jokic, with his current case, would be the slight favorite. What I can tell you for sure is that there is no chance that SGA would be minus 500, which he is, which is absurd. I think that this is a neck-and-neck race, and honestly, I've kind of been trying to avoid talking about it because you could talk about this race constantly. It is that good and it is that close. But when a race is that close, like, my opinion on it might change from one week to another, literally just depending on, did SGA have a couple of clunkers like he did this past week? I've been saying the more that the gap in terms of team success closes here, the stronger and stronger Jokic's case gets, and that's been happening. When we talked about this at midseason, I said that SGA was a clear MVP frontrunner at that point. But now we're talking about the Nuggets being 19-4 in Jokic's last 23 games. They're an elite team when he's on the court, plus 12 net rating, plus 20 on-off metrics for him. So the impact is insane, and I think it's literally the greatest offensive season that we've ever seen. At the same time, I do think the raw numbers, as insane as they are for SGA, where we're talking about almost 33 points per game on 64% true shooting, can actually undersell his impact because he's not going to put up Jokic's rebounding or assist numbers. But as an offensive engine, his scoring has been so immensely valuable that the Thunder go from a Wizards-level offense when he's off the floor, a Wizards-level offense even when he's off the floor and J-Dub is on the floor, and then when he's on the floor, they play like the best offense in the league. So Jokic has this crazy on-off differential of plus 20, but SGA is at like plus 17.5 on-off. And then when he is on the floor, the Thunder have an on-court net rating of plus 18.5. That is better than anything we've seen from any star since we started tracking this stuff in 1997. It's better than the 2016 Warriors were when Steph was on the floor. And SGA obviously has more of a defensive impact, and historically, that sort of overwhelming team dominance has been really important in the MVP race. 76% of the 65-win teams in NBA history had the MVP on that roster, and nobody's ever won 65-plus games without their second-best player for a vast majority of the season, which is what SGA has them on pace to do with all the time that Chet missed. So that's where I think both of these guys are truly making historic A-plus cases. I don't want to have to pick a winner right now because we don't have to. It's not all said and done. But I think that it is an absolute dead heat, and it should not be the case at all that SGA is minus 500. Like, it should be basically even odds.
That's kind of ridiculous to me.
That, to me, is the reflection of voter fatigue. Because when you're having the greatest offensive season ever and one of the great floor-raising jobs ever, like, when Jokic is on the floor now, the Nuggets have played at a 57-win pace. It's going to be really hard for anybody to make a better case, but SGA is having one of the best guard seasons that we've seen this century, so I do think that he's making a very comparable case. We'll see how it goes down the stretch. All I ask is that people don't get weird about it and start disparaging the other guys' case, because we've just seen that way too much with MVP races in recent years, and it sucks. It puts a sour taste in my mouth, and it's part of the reason that, like, I don't want to revisit this every week, because I just know how nasty and unfun this stuff can get when it really should be interesting and fun. But we have another related question from Yat. Given that Jokic does not win the MVP, is this the best individual season to not win the award in NBA history?
It's one of. I know you can shout out some further back years, Carson. Obviously, we have that race from way back where it was Oscar and it was Wilt, right? And it was Elgin. And I mean, that's iconic.
And Bill wins it all, 1962.
Yeah, the first one I think of is Jokic's 2023 campaign, actually, where he lost to Embiid, because I thought Jokic deserved it that year, and that was another byproduct of voter fatigue. I'm not saying that Embiid didn't have an MVP case that year. I just thought Jokic's season was better. Harden's 2017 campaign was one of the first ones I thought of, and 06 Kobe. Those were the first three that I really thought of, where I thought there was something there, and not necessarily. I do think in Harden and Jokic's case, I think that the wrong MVP was chosen, Russ and Embiid. But 06, I thought Nash still deserved it. But Kobe's season was phenomenal.
Well, 06 is just ridiculous because you have LeBron, Dirk, and Kobe all having great seasons that in an average year probably could have made them the MVP, but Nash also just had an unbelievable season, one of the best offensive seasons we've ever seen without Amari Stoudemire. So that's a great race in totality. I think the 2023 Jokic is a really, really good shout. To me, the best individual season ever that did not result in an MVP, it's either Michael Jordan in 1990 or Michael Jordan in 1989. Over those 2 years, he averaged 33, 7.5 rebounds, 7.2 assists, with 3.5 stocks per game on plus 7.3% true shooting, and the Bulls averaged 51 wins over those 2 years. Both those MVPs went to Magic. Magic, at that point, was at the highest offensive peak I believe that we had ever seen. But MJ was putting together this unrivaled combination of scoring, playmaking volume at elite efficiency with all defense level two-way impact, as incredible as Jokic is right now, I still think that I would take that MJ season or those two MJ seasons. I don't think that Jokic this year is quite topping that. But after that, it's at the top of the list. And I also think if we were to flip this and say, well, if SGA doesn't win MVP this year, he'd be on the very short list. But I get the framing of if Jokic doesn't win, because right now he is the betting underdog. We've got another question about OKC, Logan. This is from Harlow Stafford. Which team that's in contention for the 8th seed in the West is the most dangerous to OKC, even though they'd be the strong favorites against anyone?
I think it's got to be Dallas. You know, even though I think Dallas has gotten worse since Luka was traded away. You know, there's a heavier burden on Kyrie Irving. All the injuries that have stacked up for them, right? Everybody in their front court is basically injured. I think Dallas has to be the scariest team. One, because they've had their number in the regular season. PJ Washington's just turned up and turned into a monster against them every game. But just the size and physicality difference between both of these teams. I mean, Dallas is just huge and strong, and I think they can just move Oklahoma City around and out-athlete them in a way that a lot of other teams can't. I feel similarly about Minnesota, where you know, they've got a lot of good, rangy defenders. They've got a good team defense. They're jumbo-sized, right? I could see them being really physical with Oklahoma City as well. And in this order, too, is how I would put it, because I think all these teams, it would be a really competitive first-round series against Oklahoma City. I think Golden State has played Oklahoma City really, really well this season, and just the way Golden State plays, really up-tempo. They can get up and down the floor really quickly. They can match what Oklahoma City does, and I think the Clippers would be an interesting matchup. The West is just so deep that I think every first-round matchup is going to be really competitive regardless of what two teams get paired up. But Dallas, for sure, would scare me a little bit if I was Oklahoma City. Just that's a big-ass team that is just a hard matchup for them. I still think I would favor Oklahoma City in all of those matchups, but all of those teams intrigue me in a first-round matchup.
OKC is a strong favorite, almost lock against any of those teams to me. But I do think that Dallas is the scariest because of basically all the reasons that you've listed out. I think when you have an interior defense of that caliber, that puts pressure on Shai to really beat you with his mid-range shot making, which he can do, but you're taking away the super easy stuff at the rim. And you are going to be able to probably dominate on the glass. Anthony Davis is a really, really challenging matchup, even though OKC's obviously gotten bigger in the front court. Great team defense like that could potentially slow down the OKC offense, and then you get into a bit of a dogfight. That's about as good a formula as you're going to see from a team that's down in this range. I prefer them to the Timberwolves, even though that's another defensive-minded team. I just think that Dallas's roster in totality, when Anthony Davis is healthy, is better. I think they have more top-end talent, and I think that their depth is really awesome. And I do like the Warriors a lot, but they don't have that sort of defensive ceiling that the Mavs do. And I think that Anthony Davis could really be a pretty dominant player in that series. I still think that OKC is an overwhelming favorite, but that would also suck for them if they had to see Dallas in the first round, because I think that Dallas is probably a top 4 or 5 team in the West when they're healthy. They just have not been healthy this year. We have another question about Oklahoma City, Logan. Flipper Whale asks, if the Thunder lose in the Western Conference Finals, who's the ideal trade target to make them the clear favorite going forward?
To me, it depends on what exactly costs Oklahoma City in the playoffs this season. If it's the lack of a reliable second or third option, if Chet Holmgren and Jalen Williams don't pull their weight, maybe you explore going out and upgrading there and getting a more reliable offensive weapon, just a complete offensive superstar. If it's the lack of reliable shooting, I think that's where you need to focus on. If it's inexperience, I would get veteran players. If it's slightness or lack of physicality in the front court, that's what I would focus on. I think it's just specifically what area, if any, let Oklahoma City down. And I want to be clear about something. I think that Oklahoma City could stand pat, and they would be the favorite for me probably in the West next season. They're just so young and stacked. But the beauty is Oklahoma City can kind of make a theoretical run at anyone. They have 17 first-round picks through 2031, so it's like, take your pick. I mean, they can just throw an offer, a Godfather-like offer at basically any player that they want. So I don't necessarily think Oklahoma City needs to, trade for anybody. But if they do, and if they get left hanging in the playoffs, to me, it's whatever area lets them down is what I would focus on.
I'm just going to keep saying the name that I've been bringing
It's a
up.
good
I
answer.
thought they should
It's a
have
good
gone
answer.
for the deadline. I think it's Cam Johnson, man. I think that that's easy. It doesn't cost you an overwhelming amount of assets, cost you something that you should be willing to pay, and he's a super easy contract to integrate, and he's a super easy player to integrate, and he's on your timeline, and he's big, and he can shoot the shit out of it, which to me is the biggest thing that I'm looking for this team to add, that sort of consistent offensive punch, but specifically just the shooting aspect of it. I think that that would be phenomenal for them. And it's not the sort of like seismic move where you're like, oh my God, we're moving J-Dub. And like that really changes things for you. Or it's not we're trying to trade for a 36-year-old Kevin Durant. And all of a sudden, like, yeah, he's awesome right now, but our entire timeline has been thrown out of whack to some extent. I'm keeping the core in place. I think that Chet is going to be a first-team All-NBA kind of player. I think that he is on an absolute superstar trajectory. I think that J-Dub is going to be a consistent all-star in this league. And if they do fall short this year, that would be disappointing. And by fall short, I don't mean lose in the finals in a really good season to Boston. I mean lose at any point before then. If you lose in the Western Conference, that's a disappointment for OKC this year with just how incredible they've been this regular season. But I wouldn't necessarily look at that and say, okay, we have to make major changes. I also wouldn't look at that and say, okay, we're young, we can just run it back. Like, in all likelihood, if they lose, it is going to be because of a lack of surrounding offensive skill and shooting alongside SGA. And it may also be because J-Dub isn't consistent enough or good enough as that second offensive option. But I would not be moving off of J-Dub yet, even if he does have a rough postseason, just because he is still so young. The vision is there, man. And, like, he's so integral to your defense. He's so phenomenal there that the fact that he's also a guy who can have offensive star performances is what makes him a star caliber player.
Also, I wouldn't want to blow up this team loves each other.
They got a great thing going, man.
Yeah, exactly.
They got a great thing going, and I think that's where you want to be flexible. You want to be aggressive on the margins. You don't want to disrupt like the entire core of this team. But we had a couple questions about what happens if OKC loses early. And so it is an interesting thought exercise, but I would not expect major change. I would hope for some change. Okay, Grizzlies Argentina. Viva Argentina. Qué lástima que no tenemos más argentinos en la liga hoy. Espero que cambie pronto. Grizzlies Argentina says, what do you think Jaren Jackson Jr. lacks to make the league to superstar level, Logan?
A lot. I mean...
First of all, can you hit a Viva Argentina?
Viva Argentina. ¿Dónde está Luis Scola?
¿Dónde está Luis Scola?
I don't think Triple J is a really good rebounder. I think that's a big issue that could just make him a more impactful basketball player, because I don't really look at this as like a superstar, because I think a superstar can look really different depending on what your archetype is, right? How do you get your impact? Like, I would say that Rudy Gobert is not a superstar, but he has that kind of impact defensively. So it's like, what are the holes in Triple J's game essentially right now? He's not a really impactful rebounder, which I think limits him from playing the 5 spot and just being a 5 full-time, right? So you need a 5 alongside him. He's not a good playmaker. He's a frankly bad passer, and he doesn't see the game that well, right? Like, he's not a guy with great court vision, and he's going to be really limited in his impact there. And he doesn't have a really good handle still, right? Like, he's not a guy that's going to handle and initiate from the perimeter a ton. He's gotten better there, but it's like...
Pretty good for a 6'10", 240 guy.
Yeah, I mean, for his size, I'm just saying, like, he's not like a Jokic or like a guard skilled kind of guy like that. So I mean, he's still on that border though. It's not like he's grown a lot in that area, especially offensively. I mean, he's just way more reliable than he's ever been. But I'd say, looking for the future and what he could be as an older player, I think he can drastically improve as a playmaker and as a rebounder if he focuses on those areas. Am I encouraged that he's ever going to really improve in those areas? Not really, but those are the biggest areas where I could look if you want him to have just more impact across the game.
So I'm going to key in on one specific thing. To me, it's passing. That's what he lacks right now in terms of being at that superstar level, because as a scorer, he's just become an absolute monster. I mean, he's such a dominant mismatch attacker. He is so effective out of the post. He can get to his hooks. He is so effective in the lane with his push shots and floaters. He's so big and athletic, and he's got good body control, and he does handle well, and he's got really good touch. Like, he's really, really hard to keep from scoring, and he's averaging like 28 points per 36 minutes this year. He's consistently been doing that all year. But I'll give you an example of how his passing limits him. He's a 70th percentile efficiency post scorer, but when the defense commits to him on a post up, all of a sudden he's a 28th percentile post up creator.
A double or what?
Not a double. A hard double is different. A defense commits basically just means that you're showing help. A hard double is when you actually send two defenders fully at the guy. You double hard. And in those circumstances, he's a 3rd percentile post creator.
And those are like the easiest plays to make, too, when you see the defense coming, because it's like just fundamentally in basketball, when you get double teamed, the easiest thing you can do is just get the ball to the open guy or just get the ball out.
Get the ball to the open guy. He lacks vision. He can be a very, very inaccurate passer. So that's the problem. He turns the ball over at a crazy rate when he's doubled. He's a negative assist to turnover ratio guy this year, as he has been throughout his entire career. So I think he's gotten marginally better there, but that's the one thing that concerns me about Triple J. You go into a playoff series and teams aren't just going to let him go through smaller guys. They aren't just going to let him bully dudes one-on-one. They're going to say, okay, we're going to force you to beat us as a passer with your decision-making. That's my only concern. You bring up the rebounding. That's an issue of his, but he's still able to have a superstar defensive impact because of his switchability and his rim protection and his hands. Like, I think he should be first team all defense this year. And when you're that level of defender and you're that level of scorer, you've got two great components that make him like probably a top 25 player right now to me. But if you're talking about getting closer to that top 10 level, if he were a reliably solid passer, that would be the thing. But he's still really the worst passing star in basketball today. That's his core limitation. Brett Gucker, crazy last name, or perhaps crazy profession. I don't know, Brett. But he asks, what happens or what needs to happen for the Cavs to win the title this year?
Well, I don't think you can really get down offensive performances from anybody. I think you kind of need everybody to pull their weight. One, you need Donovan Mitchell to be at a superstar level, but Garland's got to be better this year. I think Mobley has to be reliable on offense. You can't just have two non-floor spacers and non-shooters again where people can just leave Mobley and Allen alone. Like, I think those guys have to punish you and be better. To be honest, I think Boston probably needs an injury to one player. I still think at full strength that Boston's just kind of this juggernaut. It's just really everything in totality together. Because I think if one piece is missing, I think you could catch Boston off. And you would probably need a player to be cold on top of that, right? Like, what Boston did last year was so ridiculous, where Jaylen Brown didn't have a complete finals. Jason Tatum couldn't hit a jumper all playoffs long. And it really, really didn't matter. And while I think Cleveland's gotten better, I think one guy needs to be off if it's Brown or Tatum, and then I think you do need an injury to a Derek White or to a Drew Holiday or to a Kristaps Porzingis. Boston at full strength is just a monster, and I know they've had some down parts of this year, and I know Jaylen Brown has been really, really off as a shooter and a scorer. That was hilarious. Speaking of the All-Star game, the air ball from the corner was just so funny and on time from Jaylen Brown. Just classic. Mm-hmm. I think somebody still needs to be hurt, because when I look at a hypothetical matchup between a Cleveland, and shout out Cleveland for being aggressive and getting DeAndre Hunter, I think that makes them a lot better and a scarier team. DeAndre Hunter is just the most complete wing they have on the roster now, and I really like that addition for them, but there's still a gap between them and Boston to me, where White and Holiday, I think, are really, really good matchups on defense for a Mitchell and a
Yeah.
Garland, and they're bigger than them offensively, where I think they could go at them on mismatches. And defensively, right against a Mobley and an Allen, I think Porzingis and Horford match up really well. So it's just a tough matchup. So to summarize, I think Boston needs to be hampered and hindered a little bit, and I think Cleveland just needs to play great basketball.
I don't think that Boston necessarily has to have an injury. I think that Boston is still a clear favorite, but Cleveland is also really, really, really good. Now, the key difference to me is what you were touching on at the end there. It's just Cleveland has defensive vulnerabilities. Mitchell and Garland, they can be competitive defensively, but they're two small guards on the floor against a team that is insane when it comes to attacking defensive weak points and punishing mismatches. With Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, that's what they do at such a high level. Kristaps Porzingis, if he gets a switch, forget a guard. I mean, any average wing, he is unbelievably efficient. That's the concern. If you can attack those guys, start creating advantages, get favorable matchups, get the drive and kick game going, they just have an easier way in. Boston does offensively in that matchup, whereas Cleveland is a great offense, but they're dealing with this incredibly versatile cast of really quality perimeter defenders and then two really good bigs, an elite rim protector in KP. It's just about the defensive end, Boston being more sturdy and sort of bulletproof there. But Cleveland could win that series if Boston goes cold shooting, if Brown and Tatum get too much into the shoot over top of these mismatches mode instead of trying to get into the drive and kick game, which is where they are at their best, especially with some of the shooting issues that Brown has had this year. If his idea of I'm going to punish a Darius Garland or a Donovan Mitchell is I'm going to put my back to the basket and shoot like a 15-footer over him, that's a win for the defense compared to I'm going to collapse the defense and create a wide open three for Derek White or another 40% three-point shooter on the floor. So maybe you get some of those offensive process issues. You get a little bit of shooting luck. Garland and Mitchell just win the battle against Boston's elite perimeter defenders, which they could do because they are that great offensively. They have been this year. Mobley is consistent offensively. Ideally, he's even hitting his threes to help out the spacing of the offense. And then he and Jared Allen are doing their thing physically inside. They're winning on the glass. You check all of those boxes, and then I think that you've got a good chance to win the series. And then if you look at the finals, you got to go up against presumably OKC. That's honestly an easier series for Cleveland to win, in my opinion, just because they have a clearer advantage.
I think they have an offensive just creation advantage.
I think so too. And that's something that they don't have over Boston, but they do have over OKC. So like if you just get one of those cold Thunder shooting series, which is much more likely than a Boston cold shooting series, Cleveland just has more options offensively. They have more reliable creators. They have more shooting. So they could do it. I would put their odds at beating Boston at like somewhere between 15 and 20% if we're talking about at full strength. I think if you play that series 5-6 times, Cleveland gets one of them. I just still think that Boston is really a team without a weakness. They really are pretty exceptional. We have a question about Boston, Logan. Ben asks, how long do you think the Celtics window is? Which player out of the core 8-man rotation do you think is the first to leave?
I think the Celtics window is probably open through 2029 just because of how they have contracts structured. So they're going to have JB and Tatum, Brown through 29 with his option, Tatum through 30, presuming they take the option. I just think it's going to be hard for guys to turn down $60 million a year.
Yeah, but who knows? Who knows when you're talking about 2029?
It is a really long time away, but they've at least got all those guys locked up. Holiday through 28, White through 29. Porzingis, to me, is definitely going to be the first to go. I just think they're going to lose him after 26. There's just no way you can pay all these guys with the current collective bargaining agreement. But as long as you have Brown and Tatum, I think that's a really solid foundation to at least be a really competitive team. And I think those guys presumably are going to continue to get better. At least I hope so, right? You know, just the way we saw Paul George kind of refine his game as he became an older wing, the way we've seen Kawhi Leonard refine his game as he becomes an older wing, right? Better playmakers, stronger, more physical, and they just became more technically proficient. So as long as these guys are healthy, I think they're going to be competitive basically into this next decade. I don't think that's too. I don't think those expectations are lofty. Boston's loaded.
They'll definitely be a good team for the foreseeable future. When you're talking about their title window, I think that obviously that is open through at least next year. Everybody other than Horford is locked up through next season, and it's just going to be a question of, does Horford want to keep playing, which I feel like he probably will for one more short contract. He's still a solid contributor, and if he is going to keep playing, I can't imagine he wants to leave Boston, and I think they can get him at a very reasonable price. But after 2026, nothing is guaranteed. Because, like you said, I don't think they'll be able to retain KP. And I know that they were able to win the title last year with him only playing sparingly in the postseason. But I think the competition this year is already a lot better. They don't win the title this year, in my opinion, without Kristaps Porzingis. I just think Cleveland, OKC, even a Denver, if they were to get into the finals, those teams are too good. And I do think that KP is so underrated and so good and is their second best player to me. Just the post scoring, the ability to stretch the floor and hit 40% of his threes, the elite rim protection. He's a pretty dominant big when he's on the floor. So let's say that you do lose him after 2026. Then at that point, Drew's contract might not be looking so great. We already have seen he hasn't had a particularly good regular season. I wouldn't be too worried about that. I do think to some extent, just conserving some energy, and he just hasn't shot the ball as well as he did last year, but we saw he was still really good in the playoffs last year. So I think he'll look better in the playoffs, but at the same time, this is a guy who is almost 35 years old and who clearly is beginning a decline. And I don't know if you're going to be able to move him on that contract at 30-something million.
Specifically, if that was your choice, if you had to choose, but if moving Drew meant that you got to retain Porzingis, would you make that happen?
I would do that in a heartbeat. I mean, KP is much younger, and he's much better. So the availability stuff, I'll live with it, man, to keep Porzingis on my team. And, obviously, right now what they have defensively in the backcourt is so great, but Peyton Pritchard is clearly a starting caliber guard in this league, and he's a better offensive player than Drew. You add that shooting, you add that creation to the starting five, and I think that's an awesome group. So yes, 100% I would prioritize KP over Drew. I just don't know that they'll have that choice realistically. So that's the concern. Losing KP and then Drew declines. Is this still a team that you look as a title front runner? Think they'd be in the mix, but I could easily see Cleveland surpassing them if they just keep trending upwards.
New York,
OKC
maybe.
is just on a better trajectory. Maybe New York. That's possible. I think that they still would probably match up poorly with Boston just because of their defensive reality and having a team built around Brunson and Cat with a team that does have this much ball handling and creation and this many athletes, this much shooting. But the good news for them is that they have Pritchard on an insane deal where he's going to make $8 million in 2028, and they have Sam Hauser on a very reasonable deal through 2029. So I tend to think they will be like a top 3-4 team in the East through 2029, but I can't confidently say that they will be in title conversations after next year because I don't think we can overstate, Jason Tatum is awesome. I think he's the 5th best player in basketball now. But the reason that this was a dominant champion last year, the reason this is a team we view as a front runner again this year is because of the totality of this roster. That's what's insane. And if you lose some of those key supporting pieces, you take a step down. And I just don't know that Jaylen Brown is really a guy you're going to want to be paying $60 million a few years from now.
He's got to keep getting better. He's got to keep getting better.
He's certainly not a top 25 player. He's looked a lot worse this year. He was awesome in the playoff run last year. Top 25? No.
I mean, with the level that he's playing at right now, but I think he was definitely a top 25 player in the playoff run last year.
Yeah, but that was the best basketball he's ever played. And I think a lot of guys have gotten better this year. Mobley has zoomed past him. Jaren Jackson Jr. has zoomed past him. Karl Anthony Towns is somebody most people would have had below him. I think he's clearly past him. We don't have to go through the exercise now, but I'm confident
he's in that range. I don't think
he's
far out of the top 25. Like, I think he's around there.
Sure. But you think about how people talk about the Cat contract as if it's an abomination that he's
a better deal.
Paid $60
Subjectively
million.
A better deal.
I'd rather be paying him $60 million. So that's the thing. Like, I just don't view Tatum and Brown on their own as a foundation of, like, we're going to be contenders every year. I think that Tatum is a superstar, but he's not that tier one guy who is going to raise your floor to a crazy place. And I think that Jaylen Brown is really good. He's a star, but he's not like an elite number 2. So that's the thing. They have to maintain the overall talent on this roster, but they do have good contracts on several of these guys. They have Derek White under control, so they will be a very good team for quite some time. I also do think that KP is probably the first to leave, though, just because he's the first guy who's got to get paid, and I think he's probably going to get paid some pretty big money. Leo asks, now that the Mark Williams drama is officially over, who would you like to see the Lakers go after this summer? Should they lean more into offense, like with Mark Williams, or get a more defensive-minded big?
Really simple. I mean, when you have Luka Doncic, like, you just don't have to worry about this position, I feel like, nearly as much. You get a simple athletic rim runner, rim finisher, and rim protector. And if you can find that guy, like, I think he's going to make Jackson Hayes look way better than he is when they're on the floor together. And again, I don't think you just need to invest a ton in that position, like whoever it is. Just get a guy who can do those jobs really simply. Set a screen, roll hard, jump high, dunk ball, protect rim, boom. Like, in a lot of ways, those guys kind of do grow on trees in the NBA. So, like, it's not like I don't think you have to spend a whole lot of capital, is what I'm saying, to go out and get a guy like this. Like, make sure he's impactful, make sure he can do the job, but Luka Doncic and LeBron James are going to enhance the hell out of whoever you get offensively. Just make sure that he's a good defender. And that's the most important part because, again, when you look at the Lakers' construction of their roster, they've got offense out the ass. You don't need to worry about offense. He needs to be a transformative defensive player. That's the first and foremost, should be the most important priority for the Lakers this offseason.
Completely agree. And the name that I've been talking about for them since the deadline, could you go out and get Walker Kessler for a similar price to the one that you attempted to pay for Mark Williams? Maybe it's more. Maybe he ends up just drawing more.
Walker's impactful.
Walker is a monster. He is a monstrous rim protector. But, like, if you give them the same first that you tried to give Charlotte, 2031, you give him 2 swaps, you give him Connect, that's got to start a conversation.
I need more.
How many seconds can I give you?
You're going to have to give me, like, Austin Reeves or something, man.
That's what I was hoping you wouldn't say, Danny Ainge. That's what I was hoping you wouldn't say. Because I don't think I'm giving you Austin Reeves.
I need both whites. I need both whites.
I can't give you both whites. I can't do a 2-for-1 white swap, which is a bummer because Kessler would be great because he aligns with the timeline.
Who could the Jazz give back with Kessler to supplement that value a little bit? Is there something there?
I mean, I
Collier,
like Taylor
maybe?
Hendricks.
I don't know. You
Colliers
just need another.
Well,
You need
I don't think we're going to be able to make this work, Danny.
Sorry.
I don't think we're going to be able to make this work. Now, I don't think that the Lakers should be like super rigidly attached to Reeves just because I think there are long-term defensive issues in that backcourt. But I'm only giving up Reeves when I love what I'm getting back because he's been playing at a fringe star level since Christmas. He's that good offensively, and he's such a complimentary offensive player. So, all right, forget about that, Danny. It's too expensive. I would love to get the young big who fits the timeline with Luka, but let me just go get Clint Capella on like damn near the minimum.
Exactly.
Like literally,
and that's a home run.
Clint Capella play for them
the
on
Lakers.
the minimum? He might, or $8 million a year, something like that. Like dudes want to play with Luka and LeBron. They want to play in LA. He's old, and then he's just a good defensive big, starting caliber. One of the worst starting bigs, but starting caliber. It's a hell of a lot better than Jackson Hayes.
What do you think about them running back Dwight Howard and JaVale McGee for the 5th time?
That would be electric. But I think their priority is defensive minded, and again, I don't think the bar is super high for this team to start getting in some real serious conversations because they just need to put together a capable defense. And if that guy's just like a simple roll lob threat offensively, now we're in business when we're talking about the Lakers because the offense is that nasty Titus Beard says, y'all talk about Amen a lot, and rightfully so, but what do you think Ausar's ceiling can be? All-star, All-NBA, top 10 player in the league? What do you guys think? And keep up the good work. Thank you, Titus. Logan, what do you think Ausar's ceiling is?
Yeah, thank you, Titus. I think Amen could be a top 25, I think, to 30 player in the league at max value. Yeah, I look at Amen, and a lot of the similar things that we love about Amen, Ausar does have, obviously the Twins, but you're looking at a guy that has all defense potential. I think if he got more minutes, I know that Detroit's been more competitive this year, so they've got Ausar kind of in that role. We're going to give you 20 to 25 most nights, but all defense level ability. He's a good cutter in the half court, and he's a problem in transition. I really like that foundation as just a basketball player. You're giving me elite defense, and you're an elite transition player. Just the stuff that you can do right there with his physical and athletic traits is really special, and I still think there's more to tap into with him offensively because neither of these guys are finished products by any means. These guys are both brilliant basketball minds. They're such high IQ basketball players, and they have a love for the game. I don't think Ausar's ceiling is as high as Amen's, but they're so young and they're so malleable, and they're going to work. Amen and Ausar's potential is insane. There's just a level of confidence that I don't know if Ausar – I think Ausar isn't as brilliant offensively as Amen is, just in the way he sees the game. He's good there, but he's not Amen's level. And then I'd say I just have more confidence in Amen developing that on-ball scoring skill set and reliable shooting more than I like with Ausar. But both of these guys are going to be really high-level winning impact wings that you want on your basketball team for the next decade. I'm so confident in that. So I think Ausar could be a top 25 player in the league one day, even with his offensive limitations. I mean, if he figures everything out like Amen, you're looking at two of the best guys on the planet.
I like that take. I think Ausar can be an all-star. I think he can be. I guaranteed that Amen would be before this year. So I do think that there's a difference, and I saw this tweet that did crazy numbers of some guy being like, it's crazy how perception has such an impact because Amen and Ausar are essentially
I saw that
identical
same
players,
shit, dude.
But we're talking about Amen as a future star and Ausar as a very good role player, and it's like, okay, well, they are literally identical twins, but they're not actually identical basketball players. Are they similar? Absolutely. Because they are both complete freak athletes who do a lot of the same things at an extremely high level. Like you said, Logan, just like Amen has first-team all-defense potential, Ausar absolutely does as well. They are both these sort of freak athletes, insane on-ball shot blockers, insane hands, the length, the lateral quickness. It's all there at an A-plus level. In transition, an absolute monster. When you talk about how Amen can be like the best rebounding wing in basketball, so can Ausar per minute. They basically have identical production there. So all of those peripheral things where you're impacting the game defensively, off ball, Ausar is also an insane cutter. With your rebounding, yes, they basically are identical. The difference is in a couple of areas. Right now, there's a real difference between these two as shooters. And there's a real difference between these two when it comes to their touch. Amen this year has made 70 jump shots at 42% effective field goal percentage. Ausar has made just 19 at under 37% effective field goal percentage. So we're talking about Amen making almost 4 times the jumpers. Amen has made 26 floaters at a 48.5% clip, which is really very solid. Ausar has made 7 floaters at under 37%. So another spot where Amen has made almost 4 times as many floaters at much better efficiency. Amen is a 71% free throw shooter. Ausar is under 60%. So in all these different areas, we see that there's a real difference in terms of just the pure touch, and we see that there's a real difference in terms of the comfort that these guys have taking and making these shots. I saw somebody say, oh, well, we just don't have enough of a sample size with Ausar. Ausar doesn't take the shots for a reason, man. He's not comfortable taking the shots. When Amen showed up this year and started taking mid-range pull-ups and they looked good and they looked natural to him, it was like, whoa, this is a leap. When he starts taking floaters out of pick and roll, whoa, this is a leap. We haven't seen that from Ausar. And some people will say, well, Ausar just kind of got stalled in his development a bit because of the blood clots. He hasn't had the same opportunity. which I do think there's some truth to, and I think that Ausar may catch up comparatively in some of these areas, but right now there is a real gap in terms of shooting and touch, and there's always been several slight differences between the two that make a difference in the aggregate. Amen has always been the slightly better athlete, specifically with the first step. I think you see it. They're both crazy. Amen is a little bit crazier. Amen has always been the slightly better ball handler. He's always been the slightly better passer. And these things accumulate. He's always had the slightly better footwork in the lane. And these slight differences get you to the point where it's like, no, these guys are not basically identical as basketball players. They're similar, but there's a difference. One of them clearly is better, and that one is Amen. But because Ausar still is so great at so many things that Amen is great at, and like he does still have chops as a ball handler, and he's still like super hard to stay in front of, super hard to keep away from the rim, and a good passer for his size, there's star potential there. But do I see like the sort of top 10 potential that I see with Amen? I don't with Ausar. I just think it would require major change in too many areas at this point for me to view that as a reasonable ceiling.
I agree with that. And the only thing I'd add on top of that is just that I think their situations are so different now, too, to where I'm just more confident with the responsibility that has been given to Amen in this Houston offense that, you know, Asar's role is just different. Like long-term with Detroit, you have Cade Cunningham, you had Jaden Ivey. It's like there's not really a reason or an incentive for Detroit to play around like that. Like, say, hypothetically, Ausar was playing in Washington where stakes are nowhere nearly as high. It's a bunch of young guys developing. Maybe they would entrust him with ball handling duties and hope that he would become that. So I just think long-term, too, I think his role is just going to be different where Houston, they're comfortable with giving him the keys. Detroit, there's not a need. And, again, there's just if Ausar was at that level, he would be doing more. They would be telling him. You know what I mean? But I just think with their current roster construction, too, I just think it's more likely that Ausar is a really, really high impactful role player, like an elite winner. And I don't want to sell that point short, is that both of these guys are exceptionally impactful with their skill sets. Amen just has more of that superstar impact where I think Ausar could have a... But they're both winners, is what I want to hammer home here. Is I think Ausar is an exceptional winning basketball player that I want my rotation. I think Ausar is going to win you basketball games.
And he has been entrusted with some more ball handling responsibilities as of late. Amen has still run like more than 4 times as much pick and roll this year. That's always been a difference. Amen just having more of that sort of lead initiator potential. But again, Ausar has some of it, and he's been producing really well as of late. He's been crazy efficient as of late. He shot above 70% from the field in 4 straight games, and both these guys are smart, and they are great competitors, and like, they don't force themselves on the game. They don't take bad shots. Like, Ausar understands, okay, great, my job here is to cut. My job is to run the floor hard in transition, push when I can, get shots around the rim. That's what he does. But Amen is up a level. Amen has gotten a lot better from last year, and I do think is on a clearly more promising trajectory. But shout out Ausar, too. He is also a freak talent. They both are, just athletically, like, insane. Ryan asks, out of the bottom 3 to 4 teams in each conference, which do you think is the best landing spot for Cooper Flagg besides the Spurs?
So I've got 4 teams that I like. You tell me what you think each. Number 1 for me, I would love if they would do this, Carson, and word to Riv on Pick Aside for suggesting this. If the 76ers would just pack it in, commit to... It's the process, man. Just commit to the tank. I can't think of a better spot for Cooper Flagg as a rookie to come in and alongside Maxey, alongside PG, alongside Embiid. Like, just immediately with his skill set and his roles, like he's alleviating some pressure off of Paul George to still be, you know, super impactful as he gets older and as he, you know, unfortunately continues to dwindle and dwindle away. He's an elite connector where I think he would amplify and make everybody better immediately. And because there's so much to pay attention to in Philly, I just think he would have a really impactful and pronounced role where, how do I phrase this? Like, Cooper to me is a connector at his best. And, you know, I think if he went to say, a Washington, right, and they entrusted him with ball handling duties, long term, I think Cooper would be really, really good at that. And you would see him get way better as an offensive creator in a spot like that. But in my opinion, an ideal winning role for him immediately would be as a connector. And I love the idea of that in Philadelphia. So that's the first spot that I would love to see him land, where he can come in and play winning basketball from day one.
That would be super fun, obviously. And I do think that he is like a guy with a uniquely win now ready skill set because of what he brings defensively, because of his IQ as a playmaker. He's just such a versatile basketball player, and he has that competitive instinct. He has the basketball IQ. He wants to win. That would be super fun.
Charlotte is my second one, and these are more realistic destinations because they're actual like bad basketball teams.
Because the Sixers aren't going to bottom out, and they're going to then send the Thunder like the 9th pick in the draft.
Yeah, probably. Charlotte I like just because I like two of their foundational pieces, and that's kind of my thing with some of these other teams. Just thinking about a top three of LaMelo, of Brandon Miller, and with Cooper, and specifically because those are offensive-oriented players, and I think Cooper's impact goes beyond that, where he could complement those guys as a screener and as a roll man. It could be impactful as a roller and a popper, where but the hierarchy isn't so solidified where it would be in Philadelphia, where he could take some possessions as a ball handler and amplify those guys off ball as well. But he's going to be a really good defender. He's going to be a really good rebounder. Like, again, he complements both of those guys, but he also addresses major areas of need for Charlotte as well, right?
Yeah.
Where if you got a solely offensive-oriented superstar, that doesn't really complement what you need in Charlotte. You need a guy like Cooper. So, and, regionally, he would stay close to Duke, too, so I think that makes sense. But I do like Charlotte as a potential landing spot, as long as they don't ruin him.
I like that a lot. And I also think if Mark Williams can stay healthy, which we probably should not expect considering his career so far and whatever popped up on the medicals that
they got Musa. They're all good, man.
You're right. They have Musa Diabate, the rebounding machine, Reggie Evans reincarnated. But like the totality of that young core, very talented. Now the problem is Brandon Miller has been super injured, LaMelo has been super injured, and Mark Williams has been super injured. So that's the big red flag here. But even though I'm not the biggest LaMelo guy, like pairing Flagg with an offensive creator of that caliber, a playmaker, a pull-up shooter like that, it would be really, really fun because he does so many connective things. Cooper does. He is so good without the ball as a cutter in transition. That'd be great. I would like to see what level Brandon Miller could get to defensively because he has tools there. And then if Mark Williams could lock in defensively and get a lot better, like there would be a lot of athleticism and tools defensively in that front court too. I like Charlotte. I think that'd be fun.
And this is the last one that I really like, and that's Portland. Now,
totally agree.
The interesting thing with Portland is that it kind of would give them
too many wings, no such thing.
A lot of mouths to feed at the wing spot, where, I don't know, I do think you'd have to move off of Denny Avdija, or you'd have to move – you probably don't want to move Kamara with the way he's been playing. He's been awesome for Portland. But, again, you're thinking about foundational pieces. Scoot Henderson, I still like. I don't know what exactly he's going to look like at his apex, but I think he's an impactful point guard and a guy that I still don't want to sell my stock on. Donovan Clingan, I think, is a transformative center. I think he is a monster two-way basketball player. And I know Aiden's had his moments this year, but he is a building block for me in the front court. I look at him as a foundational asset. And so you've got your front court of the future in Cooper Flagg and Donovan Clingan that I think you can bank on. And then you just got a lot of really good players that I like right now in Portland, where Portland surprised me, especially with what they've been doing recently. That's the hump. That is the hardest part for young basketball teams to get over, what Portland is doing right now. And that's why it's so impressive to me. That hump from being a joke of a team that is young and is rebuilding and is just getting better to being a competitive basketball team. That's why I'm also encouraged about Cooper going there, is where I don't view Portland as a basketball wasteland, where I look at Washington as a wasteland. I look at Chicago as a wasteland. I don't want you to go to these sad sack organizations. I look at Portland a little differently now, and they're encouraging. I guess you could lump Charlotte in there, so it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but I like some of their foundational assets. But those are my probably big three spots. I would really like Portland, I would really like Charlotte, and I would really like Philadelphia.
Portland would be my favorite. I just think defensively they would be unbelievable with him and Kamara and Klingon. Like the combination of secondary rim protection, perimeter defense, and outright rim protection and rebounding that you're getting from a Klingon on the interior. So nasty. And like at that point, they would just be a lead guard away from being a real serious team. Maybe it is Scoot emerging. I mean, the pull-up jumper has been so much better for him as of late, which is a really, really big deal. I don't think it's going to be Ant Simons really changing as a basketball player at this point. Obviously, Shaedon Sharpe can give you buckets, but like I'm talking about a lead playmaker. They'd have a lot of talent there, though. Like I said, I don't think you can have too many great wings, especially when none of them are like players who force themselves on the game. All of these dudes, including Denny and Kamara and Flagg, do complementary things. They impact the game in multiple ways. That would be my favorite, honestly, because I've been really impressed. Portland's a top 5 defense in the last 15 games. Like, they're putting things together, and you give them that A-plus talent, that takes them up a notch for sure. I will shout out Washington, just because, like, that could be cool for the defense, the length that they would have in total with him and Koulibaly and Sarr. But again, Portland could also have sick defense and just more talent overall and more offensive skill. And
I didn't even mention. I mean, Shaedon Sharpe is still a guy I like in Portland. I mean, they've got some intriguing guys there.
They've got a lot of dudes. Ryan also asked, any comments on the rumors Nico Harrison approached First Take about trading Logan for Chris Mad Dog Russo?
Classic Nico.
We tried to get Mad Dog in here. I'm not going to sit here and lie about it. We tried to get Mad Dog in here. We just needed more Bob Cousy takes. We needed more takes about of the hardwood.
We were going to get some autograms from Roger Staubach.
You're just too young is the problem, Logan. You may think you're
I don't talk about
Mad
autogram and Roger Staubach enough, man.
Not for me. Not for me. And I just needed a guy who was more abrasive. A guy who was more arrogant and who had less of an idea what he was talking about.
And more hair.
Yes, we tried to get
Most
Mad
importantly.
Dog.
More
Most
hair.
importantly, more hair. That's a good point, Logan. Who's scoring big in the NBA this season? You are, with all the new ways to get in on the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. From monster slams to dishing the rock to cleaning the glass, get behind your favorite players and the prop bets you can make on DraftKings, the home of NBA player props.
Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple like picking how many points your favorite player will have. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app and make your pick. First timers, here's something special just for you. New DraftKings customers bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets instantly.
Take it to the rack with DraftKings Sportsbook. Every point counts. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code NERDS. That's code NERDS for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings, the crown is yours. Nick Backer says, which non-finals appearance playoff team in the 2010s is the most underrated? We have some historical questions here, which I really like.
I just wrote down some teams that I have like nostalgia for and I think were really good. So I can't necessarily tell you if they're underrated or underappreciated, but I have really fond memories of them. The first one is Lob City. Like, I think of a team that didn't get a title. Maybe one of the greatest like runs, and I know a lot of teams in the 90s got the door slammed in their face because of Michael Jordan, and so there's a ton of teams you can pick from back there. But when I think of this decade and this era, Lob City is probably the best team that never got close. You know, I mean, Chris Paul, Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan.
They're the best to never make a conference finals. They're the best team to never make a conference finals ever.
You just think about some of the players that were in that rotation consistently, right? Jamal Crawford and J.J. Redick, right? I don't know if Lou Williams was on those later teams. He comes in. I don't think he was on those
later,
teams. Later,
after Lob City.
You know, I mean, you've got a lot of Matt Barnes, Paul Pierce, even though they were old, like those are still good rotation guys at the end of your bench, and just got every year. And then I'd shout out Paul George's Pacers. I loved Paul George's teams, and from Danny Granger to PG, all of those teams were a lot of fun. David West, Hibbert, as much as I hated him, Lance Stevenson, like those teams were fun, and they were really, really good. They just ran into that Miami buzzsaw or Cleveland buzzsaw, whatever it was, every single year. But those are the two teams from each conference that stick out in my mind of that era.
So I think that there are some really great teams that didn't get to the finals in the 2010s. I think that the best teams, you have to mention the 2018-2019 Rockets, who obviously pushed the Warriors as far as anybody did when they were healthy in that time span when KD was on the roster. Really, really dominant offenses who got to a pretty high defensive level, especially in 2018. Then you have the 2016 and 2017 Spurs, who win 67 and 61 games in back-to-back years. You have the 2014 and 2016 Thunder, 2016 Thunder, who of course beat the 67-win Spurs and then went up 3-1 on the Warriors. And then I do think you have to mention the 2014 and 2015 Clippers. Like, maybe they're a little bit of a step down from those other three teams that I just mentioned, but they were historic offenses. I mean, their number one offenses both of those years. So much talent and just couldn't get over the hump. But I'll tell you the team that I think is pretty concretely the most underrated. It's the Grizzlies from 2011 to 2015, because people have nostalgia for Lob City big time. People have nostalgia for the Pacers teams that you're talking about. The grit and grind Grizzlies, I just don't think get enough love for how good they actually were. They averaged 51.6 wins per year over that 5-year span. They won 3 playoff series, and I'm just going to take you through their playoff results every year. 2011, they beat the 1 seed Spurs. Then they lose to OKC with Russ and KD and Harden in 7. 2012, they lose to the Clippers, Lob City, in 7. 2013, they beat the Clippers and they beat the Thunder. Then they lose to the Spurs in the Western Conference Finals. 2014, they lose to the Thunder in 7. In 2015, they beat Portland. Then they lose to the Warriors. So they either lost to the Thunder in 7 twice, the Clippers in 7, or they lost to an eventual champion in 2015 with the Warriors and a team that was on the brink of a championship in the 2013 Spurs. And they beat the best teams of this era in the West. All of them. They beat the Spurs, they beat the Clippers, and they beat the Thunder. It's crazy. It's crazy how consistently good they were. The West was just insane at this time, so they get overshadowed.
Yeah, I didn't write them down because I don't know. I kind of think that they're aptly remembered for being great, but there's a lot of really good teams in the West back then. But they're a good shout.
I don't think they're remembered enough, man. I mean, I think that they're viewed as kind of like the cute, they were solid for a while, but like
I just think
they were really giving the business to some great teams.
The 2013 Grizzlies were, iconic in a lot of ways, and I mean it's a real throwback style of basketball too, man. Zebo working on the low block, Marc Gasol, Mike Conley, and they were just consistent, man. Tony Allen, every single year, just hitting that Western Conference wall.
Yeah. But, I mean, they got their licks in. They got their licks in on some of the best. Nolmi says, for Logan and Carson, which 5 players from pre-NFL and pre-NBA merger do you think would translate best to each respective game today?
So I'm just going to shout out, I just wrote down 5 guys, I think, real quick. Jim Brown, number 1, no-brainer. You put Jim Brown in any era, he's going to eat. He's the greatest running back in NFL history, in my opinion. There's one quarterback I would shout, and that's Johnny Unitas. I think when the biggest difference to me between quarterbacks then and quarterbacks now was the difference in just physical abilities. And Unitas had an arm like the guys that we see today where he could pinpoint balls. And he was just one of the most ahead of his time quarterbacks in NFL history. And I think the most ahead of his time pre-merger. And granted, Unitas' career ends up going, I think, 4 years past, but the majority of his career is pre-merger. And then some defensive guys that just, again, even though the rules were so different back then where you could play so nasty and malicious, like the game has really become so much more tame than it was even 15 years ago. You're throwing the game back 50 plus years. It is a completely different sport. It's a war. It's a true, it's gladiators going to battle. Deacon Jones, his sack numbers, because sacks weren't officially tracked, I think, until 82.
Yeah.
Deacon's giving guys concussions with his head slaps. I mean,
hell yeah.
He's wreaking havoc and inflicting pain on whatever opponent you put in front of him. Dick Butkus, same goes for him. Nasty SOB. You put him in any era of football, those nasty, crazy defensive guys are going to be successful. And then I'd say Night Train Lane, just those kind of ball instincts and the way he's jumping passing lanes. What's remarkable about Night Train Lane is I think he was doing like FedEx or like whatever the delivery service was back then. This guy was delivering packages, and he just walked in for a tryout one day and just so happens to become one of the greatest defensive backs in NFL history. But those are the guys that stick out, at least in the forefront of my mind. Are there any other NFL guys that I didn't mention that you think that come to mind when you think of this era of football?
Logan shouts out 2 dudes named Dick, and he talks about how nasty they were in their ball skills. No surprises there, man. I'm just going to move right along to the NBA. All good shouts on the NFL. I'll give you a starting 5 of NBA guys pre-merger who I think would translate really well. And maybe it's kind of boring because a lot of these are just the best guys, but I think that Jerry West's game would translate really well. Athletic downhill guard who had a pull-up shooting game, who was a good playmaker, who was versatile, who could play on or off ball, kind of one of the original combo guards. And then defensively, super long, really great instincts, one of the better rim protecting guards we've ever seen, played bigger than his size. Like, I do think that all he would have to do was extend his range a bit, and then he would be a really, really good player in a modern league. Oscar Robertson, his greatest contemporary at the guard spot, another guy who has the size, big point guard, great positional rebounder, really spearheaded the first great heliocentric offenses where he's making all the decisions, ball dominant player, but elite playmaker, elite scorer. I think that he could easily, if you dropped him into a more modern NBA, right, and you gave him all of the nutrition and development opportunities, whatever, be one of those like dominant offensive point guards who we see in the league today. Rick Barry, who was mostly pre-merger, so I think he counts. Obviously, he was in both the ABA and the NBA, but the playmaking skill set from him as a forward, I think, is something that we've just seen more and more of. The shooting ability, wasn't an elite shooter, but was a good one. I think you could space his game out a little bit further too in today's NBA. Wilt, especially when you look circa 1967, 1968, when he's with the Sixers and he really becomes an offensive playmaking hub. Just such a freak athlete, one of a time physically. In that time, just completely surpassed all of his peers and would be an elite rim protector, would be able to play make, would still be able to go over top of people out of the post and be a dominant finisher on the interior. Those were the 4 that I felt strongest about. And then I think that I'll include Hondo here as my 5th guy, just because similar to what I was mentioning with Rick Barry, although with Barry it's more offensive, that versatile forward archetype that has become more and more common, you get some of that with Hondo, where he was a really good playmaker, he was a really versatile defender. So I think those would be my 5. Really good defender. What do you think, Logan? Anyone else you want to shout out from the NBA?
What do you think about Bill
Russell? I thought about him.
I just think he would work, in any era. I get that he's offensively limited, but I just think he'd be impactful just defensively and on the glass wherever.
Oh, you muted yourself, buddy.
Wherever you put him, excuse me.
I think that he would be a dominant defensive player. I also think his agility at 6'9", his ability to move would translate really well defensively to an era of basketball today when speed and agility and the ability to cover space is more expected of bigs than ever before. Defensively, I think translates 100%. The reason I didn't mention him is just I do think his game was so tailor-made for that era just because a defensive player could never be more dominant in terms of overall impact than they were in that era when taking away the paint was so singularly important and when just being that great defensively could drive a dynasty. Like, yes, I think that Bill would still be a great defensive player in any era, and offensively, he's another guy who was ahead of his time with his playmaking, his ability to start the fast break and run handoffs and whatnot, but he wasn't a great offensive player. He had his real limitations as a scorer, wasn't super efficient. So that's why I didn't mention him. I just feel like he really was best suited for his era because that's when his defensive impact could thrive the most.
This guy straddles the fence, but I bring him up every time. The only guy I'd also mention is probably Pistol Pete, just because of his ball handling, the flashiness of it, and his floor spacing. Like, he would be so much more valuable in today's game with the prevalence of the three-point shot. Dude was averaging 40 in college, no three-point line, man. Come on.
Yeah, well, his dad was the coach and was telling him to shoot every time, but Pete was definitely tough. Pete was very, very ahead of his time with the ball handling. Like, it's crazy. That's why I consider him the best ball handler ever. Just comparative to his era, nobody has ever been further
The
ahead.
passing, he's doing stuff
Yeah.
you'd never seen before.
When he decided to pass the ball, he could be very flashy with it, very sexy with it. That's related, Logan, to our next question from Elliot Russo, who says, who are some underrated players of the 70s that everyone forgets about because of the era? I want to see Carson freak out over Charlie Scott or someone. I love that shout out. But of course,
I want to see Carson
here.
I want to see Carson freak out over Charlie Scott or someone too. I didn't write anybody down. I wanted to pick your brain.
Perfect. I'll freak out. So actually, Charlie Scott, shout out. One of the dudes who I thought of right away was the player who Charlie Scott was traded for after the 1975 season, where we got a Celtics and Suns swap, and then those teams met in the finals in 1976. And the player who he's traded for, who took the Suns to the finals, is Paul Westphal. I think Paul Westphal, especially if you look at like his 5-year peak from 1976 to 1980, giving you 23 points, 6 assists a game on plus 6% relative true shooting, just a phenomenal offensive player who took the Suns to the finals in 76, took them back to a Western Conference Finals a couple years later, wins a playoff series another year in there. Underrated individual run, an underrated team run. And by the way, I think the Suns are just so underrated as an organization, because then early 80s, they're winning with Alvin Adams and Walter Davis. Like, they've won so many games. Late 80s, they're winning with KJ before Barkley even gets there, and Tom Chambers and the boys. They just don't have that ring, man. So he came to mind. If you're talking about like a higher all-time stature, Bill Walton is the guy who I always think of, just because his peak was so brief and he was in that era, and he doesn't have like the crazy raw scoring numbers, but that combination of playmaking and defense and what he did in 77 winning the title, and then 78 before he got hurt winning MVP, that is such a high all-time peak, and it does get overlooked. But if we are going to go to guys who people really don't talk about, because people do still talk about Bill Walton, may he rest in peace, what a GOAT. I love Bill Walton. You have Westphal. I'll give you an MVP who I do think gets overlooked. Bob McAdoo really did have an incredible 3-year run as a scorer, especially, but he led the NBA in both true shooting percentage and scoring in 1974. I don't believe that's ever been done by anybody else. And in the 3-year span from 74 to 76, he gives you 32, 14, and 3 on plus 6.5% relative true shooting, 3 straight top 2 MVP finishes, 3 straight scoring titles, and he got the Braves to the playoffs every one of those years from 74 to 76. They would not make it back to the playoffs, Logan, until they had already moved twice, and now they're the LA Clippers, and the year is 1992. And he won them a playoff series in 1976, which wouldn't happen again until 2006. So even though Bob McAdoo, in the scope of MVPs, I mean, he's definitely one of the weakest that we've seen when you think about his whole career arc, it feels like a lot of what he's remembered for is like being a team hopper for most of his career and kind of the original ring chaser. But like, I do think what he did with such an incapable franchise was pretty incredible. And then the last dude that I had written down, I could go all day, but I'm trying to limit myself to just a few options here, is Bobby Dandridge, because I think it's really, really rare to see a player have this sort of impact on 2 title runs in totally different situations, like he did in 71 with the Bucks and 78 with the Bullets, where he's a top 3 scorer for the team. He's a really high-level wing defender. He's a solid playmaker. Just a dude who was very multifaceted in terms of his impact and really a winner, and played that role on a couple of title teams.
My dad always talks about McAdoo as being somebody who's really underrated for just how they're currently discussed in like the active landscape.
It's always interesting because I think about Joel Embiid and I think about some of the things that people say about him. And then I'm like, the last guy as a center who like had comparable multiple season, regular season scoring runs like this on efficiency like this, it's Bob McAdoo, man. It's Bob McAdoo, 74 to 76. So I do think that he is very much forgotten, and he really did have a very, very high peak. Ian asks, if Harden and the Rockets won the 2018 championship, how high is he all time?
I think he would have solidified himself as a top 25 player all time. I think he just needed one run. The thing about that though is it's like Harden's always been a consistent playoff dropper. And so you know what I mean? Like I still think he has that going against him. Like one ring doesn't absolve the fact that Harden consistently got worse in the playoffs, and I would still hold that against him. But he would at least have one where I can go, one year he put the team on his back, he climbed the mountain. I don't know how much higher he could be than that, but he would be somewhere in my top 20 to 25. And I don't think you could argue against it. If the level that he was at, I think we would view it probably in other people would probably have him higher, but considering the context of his other playoff runs, I think that's the range he would be in for me.
I agree. I think that he would be between 20 and 25, probably right around 22. The hard part about this is like, this is all theoretical, and I don't just value rings X amount. My brother actually just asked me the other day, he was like, how do you put together your all-time rankings and evaluations of players? And I was like, it's basically just a straight combination of peak, which I value more heavily, and longevity. Because he was like, where do accolades factor in? I said, I don't value accolades at all. Accolades are other people's attempts to measure something that I can observe and measure myself. If you get an MVP wrong, if you get an all-NBA choice wrong, I'm not going to factor that in. That doesn't matter to me. That's just human error in terms of my opinion. And then he was like, where do rings factor into this? And my take is every single ring is context dependent. They're all valued differently. What was your supporting cast? What was your competition? How did you perform? So I'm presuming that if Harden had won the 2018 title, he would have played pretty damn well to knock off the Warriors and then probably to win the finals against the Cavs, even though the Rockets were just the better team than the Cavs. So that's where I feel appropriate with that 20 to 25 range. I agree. He still would have, in totality, that reputation of being a playoff dropper. Not reputation, that's reality. But it's funny, man, because like, this is all hypothetical. Like, what if actually he didn't play all that well? Chris Paul was great. The supporting cast shot the hell out of it. They defended really well. Like, the example that I think of is Jerry West wins his title in 1972, and it's his worst individual playoff run ever. Ironically, he's one of the great playoff performers ever, and he didn't get the ring until he individually was at his worst. Sometimes that's just how it goes. So I can't say exactly where Harden would be, but that's definitely the range that I think he would be in. We have a question from Ben Burrow. Biggest NBA Hall of Fame snub and least deserving guy who got in. I'm going to point out right now, it's not the NBA Hall of Fame, it's the Basketball Hall of Fame. And so I think that for some of the weirder guys who are included, that explains a lot of it. But who did you have down here, Logan?
I didn't write down anything. I'm going to be honest. Everybody gets into the Basketball Hall of Fame. Like I don't know if I could give you a snub because I don't know if anybody's ever been snubbed. They just kind of put, and I don't like. I mean, I like it because they incorporate international play too, and there's other factors than that. So I don't know. I can't think of anybody who's ever been snubbed from the Basketball Hall of Fame. They just kind of be letting anybody in there.
I'll give you a couple. I'll give you 3, Logan. And the funny part, I was just saying a minute ago that the Suns, I think, are just the most underrated organization. I have 3 Phoenix Suns, and I'm not joking when I think they're probably the 3 biggest Hall of Fame snubs. I think Amari Stoudemire absolutely is a Hall of Fame caliber player.
That's kind of crazy that he isn't in the Hall of Fame.
6-time All-Star, 5-time All-NBA. 2007, he makes the first team. The squad is Nash, Kobe, Dirk, Duncan, and Amari. And you're like, yeah, he belongs to be there. He was just such a scoring force at his peak, so efficient, 25-point-per-game guy basically automatically on some of the greatest offenses ever, which Nash gets most of the credit for, but Amari was phenomenal. He should be in the Hall of Fame. Sean Marion, just such an underrated player because the raw numbers aren't insane, but like truly one of the great Swiss Army knife wings ever. His defensive versatility, stock machine, monster on the glass, versatile scorer. He should be in my opinion. And Kevin Johnson, not a good guy, but he really was a phenomenal guard, and was 5 times All-NBA. And like I said, before Barkley got to Phoenix, he's leading out elite offenses, like top 5 offenses year after year. Just such a quick, explosive downhill guard, such a good playmaker. I think that he also should be in the Hall of Fame. Those were the 3 guys who stood out to me. On the flip side of this, least deserving to get in, like I said, this is where it's complicated because this isn't the NBA Hall of Fame. You can look at Dino Raja's NBA resume. You can look at Sarunas Marciulionis' NBA resume. And by the way, I'm not hating on those guys. I think that Sarunas, especially, tough, very tough. But obviously, they did not have Hall of Fame caliber NBA careers. They played a handful of seasons and put up solid numbers, but it's because of their international accomplishments. So the guy who stands out to me as an American would probably be Bill Bradley. Very good contributor to some Knicks titles teams, but only a one-time All-Star. But he's like one of the college basketball goats of all goats. Scores 58 points in the third place game with Princeton, gets them to the Final Four, is averaging like almost 35 a game for a couple years. So like that's really why he's in. That's why this question is hard to answer. It would be great if we just had an NBA Hall of Fame. It'd be straightforward. These guys wouldn't be in it, but we have a basketball Hall of Fame, which in some ways is cool because it does incorporate like the international stuff, which I like. I just don't know that we need like dudes who were great college basketball players to be in the same Hall of Fame as these all-time great NBA players. That's also excluding like an Amare Stoudemire. It's weird. Basketball Hall of Fame is weird. It's the weirdest of all the American sports Hall of Fames by far.
I agree. I mean, there's at least criteria for like MLB and like, NFL, like there's standards and there's, it's just kind of like the Wild West, and you can be inducted as a coach or it's complicated.
It's weird. Generally, you're right. I mean, there's not a lot of snubs. The Basketball Hall of Fame tends to be pretty generous, but there are a couple, in my opinion. Digworthy Marshall asks, we've seen several dynasties across the NBA and NFL in the 21st century. Are you of the opinion that dynasties are good or bad for the sport when one team is consistently winning or in the championship game? Thanks for all the content, fellas. Love the show. Thank you, Digworthy. I like this question. What do you think, Logan?
Yeah, thanks, Digworthy.
Great name.
I would have a different opinion, I think. Like I used to hate the big bad New England Patriots. Now I sort of have a different viewpoint because the Steelers aren't as competitive, and I can watch the product just as a sports fan instead of just being a Steelers fan and being so jaded that my team keeps getting their ass beat by the Patriots and Chiefs. I like dynasties because dynasties show you what the pinnacle of the sport can look like. And for a while, I resented the Patriots, and then I grew to have this appreciation for Tom Brady because you see what goes into him. And Brady wasn't just great on the...
Was that in one of the TB12 docs or what? You see what goes into him?
Well, I see that what goes into how great he is as a football player. Excuse me, I'm thinking about basketball
right now. I'm sorry,
I
was on a completely different wavelength. Okay, yes, that makes a lot more sense.
Just how Tom prepared for games, and you see that it's not just God-given ability. It's just this guy works, and this guy prepares, and he prepares harder, and he was great because of the work he put in before the games. The Chiefs, I just have such a appreciation for how great the collective is, the coaching staff, the defense. Patrick Mahomes is an individual talent. I just have an appreciation for how they've mastered the sport. And the Warriors, right? A lot of people say the Warriors ruined basketball. I think they perfected basketball. I've never seen a team play better basketball than that Golden State Warriors squad. And so you can be resentful. I just loved watching Steph and KD fry everybody that came in. Maybe you don't like it because it ruins the competitive balance and the parity between the teams. I just liked seeing that level of product every night. You couldn't stop it. And in a lot of ways, it was beautiful to me. And deeper than that, I think it gives you a villain. And I have a new appreciation for the villain. It gives you a dragon to slay. Why did this Super Bowl mean so much when we saw the Chiefs fall? They had built themselves up to that point. So when they lost, it meant something. When Nick Foles beat Tom Brady on the biggest stage, it meant something. Like when Kawhi slayed the dragon, it gives you somebody to knock off. It gives you that big bad SOB. And I have an appreciation for dynasties. For a while I was resentful. For a while I hated them. I have an appreciation for dynasties, and I think when that dragon gets slayed, when they finally fall, I think it makes that win mean so much more.
I totally agree with that. I think that's a great point. I think that is the great thing about
and it's
dynasties.
just inherent
they just create
to
a
sports in
magnitude
general.
of these moments.
Yeah, like whenever, sorry, I'm going to let you go, but like when
ahead.
Team USA inevitably loses on the Olympic stage, that's going to be a historic moment in sports.
100%. So I am generally a fan of parity, but you need to have great teams. So I actually think it's different for the NBA and the NFL. The NBA has always been a league of dynasties. The NFL, not necessarily. You do have dynasties, but they're generally not as long-lived, and there aren't as many of them as there are
And it's harder
in the
to
NBA.
sustain
Harder
year
to
over
sustain.
year.
100%. Because one player can be the foundation of an NBA dynasty. That doesn't happen in the NFL. There's just too many moving parts. I do like parity, but when parity comes without truly great teams, that's where you get the 1970s NBA, which I have a great appreciation for, but it's the worst decade in NBA history, and it's clearly the least memorable. And why is that? It's the one decade in which there isn't a dynasty. You have the Celtics in the 60s. You have both the Celtics and the Lakers in the 80s. You have the Bulls in the 90s. You have the Spurs and the Lakers in the 2000s. You have the Warriors in the 2010s. I don't think you can call the Heat a dynasty, but they were a dominant team for 4 years. LeBron is kind of a one-man dynasty, no glaze. 2020s, we'll see. We don't have a dynasty yet. I do think there's a big difference between the 2020s and the 1970s, though, because there are so many strong teams. Like this year, we have the Celtics, we have the Thunder, we have the Cavaliers. I'll include the Nuggets in that group, but like these are teams that you would view as legitimate, strong champions, and they're all in the mix competing against each other. To me, that's the best outcome. That's the most fun, and that's why I think a lot of people view the 80s as like the peak of the NBA, because you have these two competing dynasties. So it's not just one team winning every year. It feels like you have two giants of a similar caliber who are clashing against each other. That to me is probably when the sport is at its best. But I'm really happy with the variety of champions that we've seen in recent years in the NBA. They're distinct. They're all incredibly talented. They're basically all led by these all-time great players. It's different and it's fun. In the NFL, parity is just always more of a reality, I feel like, where you expect going into any year that it's going to be hard to repeat.
It's different because it's a one-game format, too. There's so much less margin for error. Like in the NBA, you can have a bad game. All right, we got 7 of them,
Yeah.
NFL, if you don't have your best stuff, you're going to lose.
And it never feels like it's a foregone conclusion going into a year. Like going into 2017, I was 100% sure the Golden State Warriors, if they were healthy, were going to win the NBA title. That's not good for the sport. That's kind of a one-of-one example, though. That's just the most overpowered team that we've ever seen that was also created artificially through free agency.
Also, and what you were saying with NBA, because of how creative and free the game is, every team has such distinct styles, too, when they win the title. You're talking about, with the NFL, not that it's a rigid formula to win a Super Bowl, but there's just like fundamental tenets of every great football team. I won't say every team that wins a Super Bowl, right? They're different, but there's just so much more like boxes that you just have to check mandatorily with NFL teams, where an NBA team, the champion can look different every year, right? Like the Nuggets, they have this high-octane offense, and the Celtics are this great defensive and three-point shooting team. And I feel like NBA teams can just look so different stylistically than football teams.
For sure. Good luck telling that to Eddie Johnson, who thinks that every single play in the NBA today is pick and roll and nobody moves without the ball and they jack up threes every possession. Here's how I'll put it. Like, if I could choose how the next 7-8 years of the NBA will go, let's count the Celtics championship from this last year. Would I prefer it if the Celtics win 3 championships and the Thunder win 4 and the Cavs win 1, compared to if the Thunder wins 6, compared to if it's a bunch of different teams winning 1? My favorite outcome would be the first, where like you have 2 great teams and you have other really, really good teams who are challenging them. It's not just absolute parity, and it's not just absolute dominance from one dynasty. I think that's the best way I can describe my preferred balance in the league.
I think
Would you just want the absolute dynasty?
No, I kind of just want a different team to win every year.
Okay, well, hold on. But you were just talking about your appreciation for the dynasties.
Well,
now
I
you're
have
saying
appreciation.
Mr. Parity?
There's just so much talent in basketball nowadays where it's like different. Like, don't get me wrong. I think there's always going to be a dragon to slay in basketball, but I just kind of like, I don't know. I like seeing different superstars get on the biggest stage. I'd like to see Ant in an NBA Finals one day, right? I want to see Wemby. Spurs are another team that we didn't talk about, right? Like, they could be a potential dynasty in this era. But the NBA is just different where I just feel like there's so much more talent in the NBA. And where I could see different teams winning it. I don't think there's a foregone conclusion that a team is going to be a dynasty in this decade either. Like, Oklahoma City and Boston definitely seem primed, but I don't think it's a foregone conclusion, right? Like, I could see Minnesota getting back up in the mix. I definitely see San Antonio inevitably rising.
Yeah.
It's just...
I don't disagree. I love the parity. But I also think, like, there is a certain magnitude that comes from having all-time great teams. You want to look back in a couple decades and have that defining run.
That's what makes those individual ones so much more important. There's a reason that Philadelphia's Super Bowl win this year felt special because of this run of dominance, you know? I do think dynasties give you an appreciation for, I think, how hard it is to do on an individual year.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, yeah, I think it's a combination of the two. I think you like the variety, you like the parity, but also you definitely want to have truly great teams. Roddy Piper's Ghost asks, if MVP always went to the best player in the world and narratives weren't a factor, how different would certain players' trophy cases look? And he offers a few suggestions. LeBron. What do you think, Logan? How different would it look?
Dude, I don't know how to answer this question because I feel like LeBron would just have 15 MVPs or something ridiculous like that. Like, if we were just going best player on the planet.
Right. So here's how I'm going to interpret that. I'm going to say best, most deserving player purely that regular season because
I think LeBron would have 10 MVPs.
I don't agree. I really don't agree. Which MVPs was he robbed of?
I think LeBron has an argument to win every single MVP from first year of Miami to last year in Cleveland to maybe first year in LA. All of those years, I think LeBron.
Well, first year in LA, he played 55 games and they missed the playoffs. 2020
when they won the finals.
2020. So
I think LeBron has an MVP case probably every single one of those years, and he doesn't get a single one because it's just.
Well, he gets 2012 and 2013.
You can't give it to LeBron, you know.
Yeah, I don't agree that it's that drastic a thing. Now, I think if we were just purely to look at, in a vacuum, who was the best, most deserving player this regular season, LeBron probably gets 2011. I'm not the biggest fan of Derrick Rose's case. I do think he did a really impressive offensive floor-raising job, but that team was great because of their defense. They were an average offense. His efficiency's not great. It's not my preferred sort of MVP case. It's reminiscent of like 01 Allen Iverson. LeBron was never going to win that year because of narratives, and like the Heat weren't a historically great team. They were just pretty good, but it's just not a very good race. Dwight ends up finishing second above LeBron. I think I would have given it to LeBron that year if narratives were not a factor at all, but I don't think he gets it in 2014 over KD. 2015, I don't think he gets it over Steph. I mean, Steph's offensive impact was just absolutely absurd. He definitely doesn't get it 2016 over Steph. 2017, I think Harden and Kawhi both made better cases. Like, LeBron just coasted through a lot of regular seasons. Yes, he was the best player in the world for basically 15 years, but he wasn't the best player every regular season. So I think 2011 is the one year that I look at and I say, yeah, he probably should have gotten it. 2020 is very close between him and Giannis. That's the other one that I think he would have the best argument for, but I still think what Giannis was doing defensively with his efficiency, how great Milwaukee was as a team, I think that Giannis just deserves that one. The on-off impact.
I also think it's just because they give it out in the regular season too. Like if we did playoffs included, I think LeBron's trophy case would be loaded. Like, I mean, he's just dragging those teams to being competitive, but I don't know. That's why I think you have to view it through what he's saying is the best player in the world, where like...
Yes, but that's a different thing. Best player in the world is different from MVP.
Yeah, I agree. But that's what I'm saying. I think it goes against the spirit of this guy's question. Like, if he's saying best player in the world, like, because that's what MVP is. MVP is the regular season resume and the
Yeah.
totality. And in that case, if we're looking at it through that lens, I think LeBron has the correct amount of MVPs, and maybe you could give him 2011 or I think 2018.
I think that's the
LeBron
more
had an
interesting
case
question.
too.
I think that's the more interesting question because otherwise we're just discussing, well, how long were these guys the best players in the world.
Yeah.
I don't know his question. I think your interpretation is valid. I think that he means, though, the best player that season.
Then I would
like
say
if non-basketball factors weren't involved, voter fatigue, narrative.
I think LeBron would have 1 to 3 more.
Okay, I think it would be tough to get up to 3. 2006 is another year that he has a case.
I would
also.
say
he's got a real case. That's
2011,
an awesome season.
I'd say 2011, 2018, and 2020, I think, would be more debatable years. But you're just not. LeBron's not getting those.
Harden deserved it in 2018. But, I mean, obviously, LeBron was top 3.
Well, like, Harden
15
deserved
straight
it in
years, so-
2017. You know what I mean? Like,
Sure. I mean, I did think that in 2017, LeBron should have been over Russ. But that's another story for another time. I'm not saying LeBron should have won it. I'm saying he should have been third and Russ should have been fourth. But again, that's a story for another time. Jokic. I think this one's pretty easy. I think it's 2023.
I'd say 1 to 2 more, just depending on how this one goes.
This one, sure, I'm not counting that yet because it's not been decided.
But
But also,
2023,
2023, Giannis made an incredible case. It should have been one of the two. It shouldn't have been Embiid.
Agreed.
Yeah. Okay, how about MJ?
Same thing with the voter fatigue. I mean, but there's a lot of MVPs that I think were deserved. Like, I think Barkley rightfully earned his MVP.
Yeah.
MJ had a case. I feel like every year he was out there, but I do think guys earned those MVPs.
I actually think, ironically, although LeBron is best player in the world for longer than MJ probably got screwed out of more MVPs just based on pure regular season basketball merits. Like, 93, Barkley was great. He was. I struggle to see the case that he makes a better two-way argument than MJ. He's a little bit more efficient. Is he the more impactful overall offensive player? Probably not. It's close there, but then MJ is clearly the better defensive player. Their team success is comparable. The Suns were a little bit better. I think they won 63 games and the Bulls won 57. So, like, I think MJ probably deserved that year. He absolutely deserved one of 89 or 90. Like, Magic is great at that time, but to me, that's a little bit of overvaluing raw team success, not considering situation. Magic, again, was at like the GOAT offensive level at that time, but MJ was putting up his super efficient 33, 7, and 7 with all defense level production. And then a lot of people would probably say he was robbed in 97. I just think he and Karl Malone flipped MVPs. I think that MJ probably should have won in 97. Malone definitely should have won in 98. Like, Karl Malone had the same season almost that he had in 1998, in 1997. The Jazz, I think, won one more game in 98. His efficiency was like identical. His production was like identical. His on-off numbers, which I didn't even look at back then, but they're great in both. And MJ had a much worse season in 98, but they gave it to MJ in 98 when his efficiency had fallen off a lot. Like, so I think that MJ probably should have 2, maybe 3 more. But we'll say 2. We'll say he and Magic should have split, and I'll say that he probably should have gotten 7 if it were just going to the best player that season. Bill Russell, I don't think his would change.
I agree.
I'll tell you the guy who I think is most affected, Logan. I think it's Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Because we can talk about these LeBron years and we can talk about these MJ years, but there's some ambiguity with them at least. Kareem just flat out should have won in 1970. And he flat out should have won in 1973. I think there's no argument that Willis Reed was better in 1970. I think there's no argument that Dave Cowens was better in 1973. It's just rewarding the better team, and maybe they just didn't want to give it to a rookie in 1970, but Kareem takes, what were they, a 20-win team, and he turns them into a 56-win team and is completely dominant from day one. They were a 27-win team, and then he took them to a 56-win team, averaging 29, 15, and 4 while being an elite defender, like with great efficiency. He got robbed. He should have won the first 5 MVPs of his career. He really should have. He was that clearly the best player on the planet from the jump. That's an interesting question, though. All right, last NBA one. Then we're going through NFL. This is just going to be the mother of all episodes, and then we'll get to some of your guys' miscellaneous questions. Frankie asks, if you could make one rule change to the NBA, what would it be?
I'd give players an extra foul for every overtime period that's played. I just think that it's difficult when you get to double OT and you got guys playing 40, 50 minutes to just avoid those fouls naturally. So if we go to overtime, and maybe if you don't want to do it for the first overtime period, maybe I get it, maybe every extra. So if it's like double OT, you get an extra foul or something along those lines. I just think it's hard to not foul out when you're getting into these double OT, triple OT games. And there's some other ones that I think are interesting, but that would probably be my first one.
I like that. I would make the rip through a non-shooting foul always. I would say, fair enough. Your hand's in the cookie jar. You got caught. That is a foul. Theoretically, you're impeding his ability to, put up a normal jumper from here. But we can tell that's not a legitimate shot attempt, so we'll give them the foul. But it's just a side out. If they're in the bonus, you shoot free throw.
Ball, no point.
Foul.
Ball, no point.
So to speak. But you're not just going to grift your way to 2 free throws. I just don't think it's good for the sport. Let's be real. 2025's been all about change. Whether it's work, personal stuff, or just the daily grind, it can be hard to keep up. But here's the deal. When things get hectic, we don't have to go through it alone. Embrace the power of nature and elevate your everyday with Via. Trusted by over 500,000 happy customers, Via is the Swiss Army knife of wellness, dedicated to harnessing the natural benefits of hemp to create high-quality wellness products. Whether you're looking to improve your sleep, focus, recovery, add a little pep to your step, or just get high, Via has something for you. With products ranging from 0 to 100 milligrams of THC, Via gives you the power to blaze your own trail.
Via is well renowned for their award-winning THC and THC-free gummies, THCA flower, soothing topicals, and calming drops, all crafted with the highest quality hemp sourced from trusted, independently owned American farms. And the best part, Via legally ships to nearly all states in the U.S. in discreet packaging directly to your door with a worry-free guarantee, no medical card required. So if you're 21 plus, check out our link to Via's website link in our description and use code NERDSESH for 15% off and free shipping on orders over $100. And if you're new to Via, get a free gift of your choice.
Via really is just the best, man. They've got whatever you need, whatever mood, whatever vibe you're feeling, they've got you covered. Personally, I'm a huge fan of Cloud9, but it's all good stuff. And by the way, the gummies are legitimately delicious. You're going to have to hold yourself back from taking too many just because you're going to want a little bit more of that sweet, sweet flavor. So we can't recommend it highly enough. Quality ingredients, affordable, accessible. Check out Via.
If you're 21 plus, check out the link to Via in our description and use code NERDSESH to receive 15% off, free shipping on orders over $100, and if you're new to Via, get a free gift of your choice. After your purchase, they ask you where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. Enhance your everyday with Via.
On to the NFL. Liv asks, Carson, if you were GM of the Bills, what realistic moves would you make this offseason to push the Bills an extra step further? I think very clearly the biggest need is a dynamic edge rusher. We saw once again the defense's failure to generate any meaningful pressure in the playoffs against Patrick Mahomes. I am willing to sell the farm for Myles Garrett. As I've said, I'm willing to send 2 firsts, AJ Epinesa, a third. I'm there at that asking price, and I think that something in that range should be able to get it done. So that's my top priority. I think the Bills have the means to do it. Other than that, I'd probably only bring Amari Cooper back on a discounted price, which I hope should be possible because he didn't produce much this year at all. But if it's not, that's fine. They don't need him. They were an elite offense before he joined the team, and he really never popped in the offense as I hoped he would. It's nice to have a guy who can win reliably one-on-one, but he didn't play like a star. I don't think that he needs to be paid like a star by the Bills. I'd bring back Rasul Douglas for the right price. He didn't have his best season, but I do think he's a good corner, and I think when fully healthy, that is a really good corner group with him and Christian Benford and Taron Johnson, but he's the least important of the 3 in my opinion. And then in the draft, I'm going safety at the top of the draft. That's my top priority. That's where I think the team needs the biggest upgrade outside of making that splash at edge. And if Amari Cooper does walk, then my next top priority in the draft is wide receiver. But also, it's kind of like, if you're just drafting for depth, receiver isn't as big of a need. I would like the Bills to add that true number one if they can. It's just Amari ended up not being that guy this year. The depth of the receiving room is solid. They just don't have that one like star level guy. But that would be my approach. What do you think about that, Logan?
I like it. I think it's a good approach. I think edge has to be your number one priority if you're Buffalo. Like that is just so clearly their biggest need. I mean, the two most important positions in football. Carson and I talk about it all the time. They got the quarterback. Now you need that guy who can go and get the quarterback. And I'd be willing to sell the farm to make that happen. If you can get Myles Garrett, I almost don't care what Cleveland asks. I'd bend to their will.
Yeah. Now we have the same question for you, Logan, but for the Steelers. What would you do to make the Steelers playoff game winners? Yeah. Sorry, the bar isn't Super Bowl like it is for the Bills. It's playoff game winners.
All right. I'm letting Russell Wilson go.
See
We
ya.
saw his limitations this year.
Well, he's unlimited, but
I'd give actually, next up, let Najee Harris go. Najee's not worth paying anything else. He's not the best running back on this roster. It's clearly Jalen Warren. Let him go. Let those guys off the books. Arthur Smith has 2 years remaining on this deal. I'm giving him the life of this deal that we have agreed to. 2 years to prove himself as a competent offensive mind and coordinator, and we're going to give Justin Fields the reins for a season. That should be priority number one. And the thing that I'm slowly but surely working on a video on my opinion of Mike Tomlin. I've wanted a couple of weeks of football to get my mind right and to figure what exactly I want the Steelers to do. And I want them to keep Mike Tomlin. I also want them to make and not be afraid to make major changes offensively. Just be willing to be more aggressive, be willing to take shots. The thing that I want to be clear about, everybody's upset that we keep losing in the first round of the playoffs. My bar has changed. My measuring stick for the Steelers' success has changed. I don't care if we lose in the first round of the playoffs anymore. And to be quite frank with you, I'm not going to care if we continue to lose in the first round of the playoffs year after year. Are the Steelers primed to go on a Super Bowl run? No, because we don't have the quarterback in place. So whether we lose in the first round of the playoffs or the second round, it doesn't make a difference to me because we are not equipped to go beat Lamar Jackson, to go beat Josh Allen, to go beat Patrick Mahomes just yes. I want to see tangible success, measurable success, and improvement from the offense. And if we don't get that in the next 2 years, I'm okay with moving on from Arthur Smith or maybe exploring something from Mike Tomlin. Mike needs to prove to me that he is a changed man, that he's going to be willing to be more aggressive in games and be willing to make big sweeping changes offensively. I don't care about winning or losing. Yes, I would love to see us win a playoff game. I just want to see improvement from the offense. Because I think Mike is that good of a floor raiser every single year. And I think that's way too valuable. I'm going to have a long-winded version of this in the video that I want to do, but basically, I think Mike's much too valuable of a coach to give up on. And I think this goddamn Steeler fans are so fucking spoiled and pampered that they don't appreciate what we already have in place. Guys, 80% of NFL franchises would kill to have a guy like Mike Tomlin in their house, and he is much too valuable to let walk. So those are my, let Russ go, let Najee go, give Arthur and Justin the reins, and just see what happens. Just temper your expectations. Our expectations, I get it. We're Steelers fans. We want to see a Super Bowl. Our expectations should not be we don't have Josh Allen. Carson, you guys should be focused on the Super Bowl. Our expectation should be offensive improvement to being an average offense. What else do we need to do other than letting Arthur and Justin go to work to make that happen? Number one, it's either wide receiver number 2 or it's tackle. And the reason I say that is because I don't know if Broderick Jones is the long-term answer. We got boned this year when Troy Fontenot got hurt, and we had to start Dan Moore Jr. and Broderick Jones. Our offensive line was never going to look great with Dan Moore starting. So if we're confident in Broderick being a good left tackle, go someplace else. Go wide receiver 2, go cornerback, or go interior D-line or edge. And those are my biggest concerns and needs. If you don't think Broderick Jones is the answer, then draft a tackle in round 1 and just see if we can trade him off, or he can be a swing tackle as a backup for us when we need him. Get a wide receiver number 2, or maybe wide receiver number 1. I don't know if George Pickens is the answer with his character issues. And honestly, I empathize with George. I get it. If I had Russell Wilson not throwing me the fucking ball for a whole year, I'd be frustrated too. And so if George wants to see his way out of town, go get a king's ransom for George Pickens because he's a number 1 in this league. If George is willing to get his mind right and be a team player, keep him. So that's kind of my thing. It depends on what you think of Pickens and Broderick Jones' assets. If they're your guys, we ride with them and we go to other parts of the team. If they're not our guys, we invest highly in the draft and free agency. I am confident, though, Omar Khan was more aggressive than our previous regime ever was at making moves in the offseason, and I trust Omar to make big moves. But if the ball's in Mike's court, in my opinion, Carson, if the Steelers are going to commit to being an aggressive football team, they play prehistoric football. I'm sick and tired of it. We've been playing scared football for a while now in the post-Big Ben era, and that can't hang. I'm not willing to just cut Mike loose yet. I think we need to give him 2 or 3 more years to really overhaul this offense and to give Arthur Smith and Fields a chance. If I don't see anything from 2 to 3 years that's encouraging me, then I would be willing to throw a stick of dynamite into the Steelers organization and overhaul. But I don't think that's this year. So this is a long-winded way of saying, let's see what happens. And temper your expectations, please, Steeler fans, because we're not winning the Super Bowl, man. That's just not happening.
What would be your reaction if the Steelers went out and they got Aaron Rodgers? Okay, it hasn't actually happened.
I wouldn't want to watch the Steelers. First of all, I don't think Aaron Rodgers is good enough at this point in his career to mitigate the issues that we have with our offensive line. McCormick, I think, is a good guard. Frazier's a stud. We have good players in place. Like, I like Sumalo. I like the guys. We're not perfect. And I think Rodgers is going to be under a lot of pressure again next year. And a lot of Russell Wilson's limitations, I think, would be limitations for Aaron Rodgers. And that's specifically why I like Justin Fields here, is because his athletic traits can prop up this offensive line and make them look better than they are. And he can make plays. Rodgers is going to get killed. The same way it's not going to be as bad as it was in New York, and also, I don't want that diva in the building. Rodgers is going to bring a whole lot of drama that I don't want. Rodgers, to me, is spoiled goods. I would not want Aaron Rodgers as my quarterback, period.
I think that Rodgers is fine. I think that he is better than Russ at this point. But would I want to deal with all of the non-football stuff? I just think the Steelers are such a culture-based team that, I would rather not be in the Aaron Rodgers business.
Yeah, I mean, if Rodgers came to Pittsburgh, I think I might pick us to have our first losing season in the Tomlin era. I would.
Just because the vibes would be so bad?
Yes. He is for a team like Pittsburgh, I think he would be cancerous.
I am good with the option of proceeding with Fields. Give him a year, maybe give him 2, see what happens.
Also,
do I think he's a high-end starter? No.
The bigger thing to me is that the quarterback class that we have is not one that I like. If there was a quarterback that would be available, to me, this draft is very simple. It's Cam Ward or bust. If I'm not getting Cam Ward, I don't want to touch a quarterback.
That's fair, and that's reasonable, and I don't think you want to force it this year. So I'm good with Fields. Try to upgrade tackle.
Now,
try
Sam
to get a wide receiver
Darnold, on the other hand, if he came available, I may be interested.
Interesting. How much would you be willing to pay Sam Darnold?
$30 million, no higher.
I don't know if that gets it done.
Then I'm probably cool with rocking with
But that would
Fields.
be good for the Steelers.
I think
that
it would be
good
too.
for the Steelers, getting Darnold at $30 million. I think that would make them a more legitimate playoff team. I think the plan that you've laid out leads to marginal improvement, and you're taking a stance on a direction which I think you could consider a good offseason.
I still think
overall.
Fields
You're not going to
could
fix
be-
everything in 1 year.
I still think Fields could be a franchise guy. And again, I want to be clear about something. Fields is never going to – that guy doesn't exist. The Steelers are fucked for a long time. Mahomes ain't going nowhere. Lamar's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Josh isn't going anywhere. It's like we're going to have to put the team around the QB. We're going to have to win like the Eagles. And that's a really hard – that's a dominant team.
Yeah.
It's not easy to put all that together, man.
No, it's not. No, it's not. You know who does have the quarterback, though? The Washington Commanders. Etienne asks, will Jaden Daniels take a second-year leap or have a sophomore slump?
I feel like I'm more confident in Jaden not having that sophomore slump the way we have seen a lot of quarterbacks getting bitten by that bug, right? Stroud is the biggest one, but T-Law, and T-Law's wasn't a sophomore slump. It was more a junior slump, so to speak, because we expected him to take that leap. His sophomore year after Urban Meyer. Jaden's different. That's all I'll say. I thought Stroud was the best rookie I had seen, but Stroud played better than his numbers or played worse, I think, than his numbers would have suggested in that rookie season, right? A lot of drop picks, right? That was kind of a fake number. It was impressive, and he did take really good care of the ball, and he made plays and stuff, but that was a bit phony, and Jaden's just different. Jaden's on a different level. The way he processes the game, the way he prepares, how much film he watches, like, I'm not going to say a leap because I think it's really hard when you set the bar that high. I don't know if we're going to see him get way better than that, but I think he's either going to stay at that level or get marginally better. But a leap's just really, I mean, you're 100%. Asking him to be Mahomes or something, you know?
I'm going to say that Jaden roughly replicates his rookie season, statistically. And I think if he does that, considering now you have a year of him on film, like, that's a success to me if he puts up the same numbers and if he leads you to be a top 5 offense again. Like, his efficiency was insane. His production through the air and on the ground was awesome. Now, the offensive situation around him should be better, but like you said, it's just taking a leap from the standard he set is really hard, but I don't expect him to slump. I think he showed so much composure down the stretch of the year. His legs are such a massive advantage for him in stabilizing any performance. He's got such a good thing going with Terry. I think Cliff is a good OC to pair with him. I think he'll have a really good second year, but yeah, not a real leap. I definitely would not expect a slump either, though. D-Ray asks, how many individual running back seasons would you take over Saquon this year?
So if we're including the playoffs, which I think is vitally important to Barkley's case, only 3 seasons. I would take 97 and 98 Terrell Davis just because TD's such a monster. And I think I would take 85 Marcus Allen. But in totality, those are the only teams. If we're just looking at regular season, I definitely think there's some guys that I would have above him. 09 Chris Johnson, 99 Marshall Faulk, 19 Christian McCaffrey, right? These dual threat monsters. And then 06 LT is one of the most untouchable seasons ever if we're just looking at regular season. 97 Barry Sanders, and I would say 2012 Adrian Peterson. But I think playoffs included, I think it's a top 5 running back campaign ever, top to bottom. And then regular season included, just regular season, I think top 10's about right.
This is what's so hard about football. A running back really just does not have that much say on if his team is even in the playoffs. Doesn't have say.
True.
On the
09 Chris Johnson went 8-8.
Like, Saquon had a historic defense on the other side of the ball. He had a dominant offensive line that had been producing elite rushing offenses for years. And so he had a great playoff run, but he was in a very good position to have a great playoff run. Whereas, like, a lot of these other guys just didn't have that opportunity. So I think 1998 TD is still easily the GOAT combination of regular season and playoffs. And 1997 TD might be number 2. But, like, yeah, Saquon is in that rarefied air in terms of putting the regular season with the playoff run both at, like, such a high level.
And if he had even like a good Super Bowl, I think there's a real case for him to be higher.
Really good Super Bowl. Really, really good Super Bowl. I don't know, man. 1998 TD, that's like the pinnacle of it all. I'm still going to have a number of other seasons higher than Saquon, though. And the reason for that is I'm just not holding it against 2012 Adrian Peterson that he didn't have a Super Bowl caliber roster.
Yeah, Christian Ponder.
Exactly. And he's averaging 6 yards a carry and gives you 2,100 rushing yards in the regular season. So the list I have is 98 TD.
That's what's nuts, man.
Unbelievable. So I have 98 TD, 63 Jim Brown, 2012 Adrian Peterson, 97 Barry Sanders. Those are both MVP seasons. 2006 LT, 2001 Marshall Faulk, but you can really pick any season from 99 to 2001. 1973 OJ, and 1984 Eric Dickerson. Those are just the guys who I think individually were playing at a higher level, circumstances included, and again, not holding it against them that they are one of 53 players on a roster playing running back, which is a position that's very dependent on the circumstances around you in terms of the impact you can have on the game.
I would also take Dickerson, OJ, and I just didn't include a lot of the throwbacks, and Brown too. Those are all good shouts. So it's realistically, it's somewhere between the top 10 and a top 15 running back season, I think, all time. And
I would have it, if we're not counting repeats from any players, as number 9.
Yeah, it's in the top 10.
It's an amazing season. It's an amazing season. He set the all-time record for yards from scrimmage between a regular season and postseason. That sort of sustained dominance was crazy, but I think that the dudes who had better regular seasons, and then the ones who did get to make the playoffs, showed up. All of them balled in the playoffs. It's just there's too much around you that you can't control. It's not the NBA, man. It's not even quarterbacks where people already overstate an individual's impact. It's running back. Your team success only has so much to do with you. Kalos64 asks, based on current Pro Football Hall of Fame criteria, who are some of the biggest Hall snubs at quarterback? You have to be eligible, but you're not in.
This is a good question. Honestly, I think for the most part, I think the NFL Hall of Fame, I don't think has too many snubs at quarterback. I think most of the guys that are in are deservedly in. Number 1 on my list would be Donovan McNabb. And the reason I say McNabb is just because he just gets so overshadowed by the great quarterback era that followed him with Breeze and with Brady and with Peyton and all these, first ballot Hall of Fame quarterbacks. And it's a shame because McNabb went to 5 straight title games, was a consistent winner, got to the Super Bowl, almost beat Brady. That's such a close game. McNabb's resume is great. And I would say in totality of his career, I would say the first 2 guys out for me are Donovan McNabb and Steve McNair. And I probably would have both of them in the Hall of Fame. And they're so close. McNair is a foot away. McNair is a foot away from being a Hall of Famer. I think McNabb is a game away. I think if both of those guys get a ring, I think they're in there. And then for guys with one-off seasons that are close, I don't think they're in McNair or McNabb's territory, but Ken Anderson has a good case. Joe Theismann has a good case. Boomer Esiason, and I would say Phil Simms, but I understand why those guys aren't in. It's a career thing. The NFL has proven that. And that's why I was surprised Sterling Sharp got in this year. I'm glad they put Sterling Sharp in there. I think he deservedly made it. But traditionally, guys like that have a brief peak that don't have it sustained for 8+ years, they normally don't get in. McNabb, I think, is probably the best quarterback ever that's not in the Hall of Fame. And I think I would have him in the Hall.
Wasn't Sterling Sharp already inducted?
Was he? I thought he got inducted this year.
What is this? Inductions 2014 and 2025? Did they induct him twice?
Two-time Hall of Famer.
Two-time, baby. My honest take, there are no quarterback snubs for the Pro Football Hall of Fame. There's not a single guy who is eligible who I think should be in who is not in. In fact, I think we could trim the fat a little. Shout out to McNabb. He feels like the definition of Hall of Very Good to me, right? He's the sort of guy who should be just outside. Troy Aikman, Jim Kelly, these are guys who are in the Hall of Fame who I think should be Hall of Very Good. The Pro Football Hall of Fame has a lot of snubs. They can be stingy. Not with quarterbacks, though. They're pretty generous with quarterbacks. So, the names that you shouted out are some of
I would have
best guys who aren't in, I still don't think any of them should be in with the standard that is set at all the other positions.
The guys that are going to get in, they're going to frustrate me. I don't think Phillip Rivers should be in the Hall of Fame. I don't think.
Well, that's crazy. He should be in the Hall of Fame.
I don't think Matt
Phillip
Ryan
Rivers
should be in the Hall of Fame. Those are all of very good guys to me.
So you think that McNabb is better than Phillip Rivers? That just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, Rivers is not that good, bro.
Oh my God, you hate Phillip Rivers.
Rivers didn't win jack, bro.
Dude, he put together elite offenses. He doesn't have anything to do with the defense.
Mid.
Bro, he's been automatic top 5 offense in like the mid 2000s and early 2010s. I'll let you know when I get to a Chargers offense that wasn't top 5.
Tax, Antonio Gates tax.
You disgust me, bro. He was doing it after LT. He was doing it post LT. You're a hater. I'm literally going, okay, 2012 was the first non-top 5 offense that Phillip Rivers
He's cheeks,
led.
man. He's overrated.
You hate him so much. Doggone it. All right, last NFL question. Nigel K. Hurts is being propped up as a top 5 quarterback after the Super Bowl, but is he even top 5 in the NFC? I have JD, Stafford, Dak, Kyler, Love, and Geno above him, with Goff, Baker, and Purdy in his tier.
Hurts would be 6 to me. Stafford, I still think is the best. Out of respect for him, I would have Jaden 2, and you could flip those if you want. Jaden and Stafford, I both think are in that elite, bordering on elite tier. Then I would go Jordan Love. Then I would go Geno Smith, and then I would go Baker Mayfield. And then I would have Hurts. And I think Dak's overrated. I would not have Dak above Hurts. Oh, I'd have Kyler too. I would have Kyler as well. I didn't mention Kyler. I definitely would have Kyler above Hurts still.
I would have Dak above Hurts, man. Let me know when Jalen Hurts or several of these other guys take a below-average run game, a mediocre offensive line, an offense with one great receiver and just kind of meh options besides that, and leads them to be the number 1 scoring offense in football and gives you 4,500 yards and 36 touchdowns to 9.
Call me when Dak Prescott wins back-to-back playoff games.
Logan. Call me when he has the Eagles roster. Call me when he has the 2024 Eagles roster.
Dak's not that guy, man.
You hate certain dudes.
Dallas
You don't think
Cowboys.
Dak is better than Jalen Hurts?
Who?
Dak.
Is better than who?
Jalen Hurts.
No.
You're so low on Dak. I can't wait for him to prove you wrong.
I can't wait till Dak throws 20 picks again next year, man.
So you say again like he's ever done that. You just manipulating the numbers however you want. He's not Vinny Testaverde, Logan. I think that Dak is clearly better. I think that Jaden is clearly better. I think Stafford is clearly better. I think all those dudes are in a totally different tier. I'd still take Jordan Love. I still think he's the better arm. I still think he's a more dynamic creator. After that,
Baker.
Give me Baker. I agree. All right, so that's 5 right there. A lot of these dudes are really close.
Taking
Kyler,
Geno or nah?
Geno.
It is close between them. I won't lie. And I do think I would take Hurts. I would take Hurts over Goff as well now.
Yeah, Goff played a really costly playoff game with the turnovers. Like, Hurts played really well in his last 2 playoff games. He really did. He played really well. It's just, I cannot believe where the discourse has gone.
It always does.
To the place where we're talking
and
about
you know what?
Hurts being top 5.
Somebody said it really well in a comment section I saw. It is the Stephen A. Smithification of sports talk, and I utterly despise it. It is whoever is the loudest is the correct. And it's just like, they have dumbed sport. ESPN has dumbed sports down so much. It disgusts me, man, because I love this.
Amen.
And I just hate that we cannot be rational about sports anymore, man. It's all or nothing.
The quarterback stuff is just so stupid, bro. Like, why can't we just talk about the fact that the Eagles have the best roster that we've seen in like almost 20 years? Maybe that's the reason they won the Super Bowl. Maybe the reason that they won the Super Bowl is that they made Patrick Mahomes fully shit himself for a game of football in a way that we haven't seen anybody else do. Not even the Bucs had him as deep in hell as he was in the first half. Basically the first 3 quarters until we were in full garbage time. Jalen Hurts didn't even have to do anything. Jalen Hurts wasn't playing that well and they were up 24-0. Like, that just really infuriates me. people talking about, oh, Hurts has done what Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen never have. It's like, dude, come on, man. Josh Allen in 2021 didn't play a better game than Jalen Hurts did. Imagine if Josh Allen's defense gave Patrick Mahomes an aneurysm. It's just so stupid that people can't isolate the factors when it comes to winning football games. Hurts played really well in his last 2 games. He also played a lot of mediocre football this year. I think he's a solid starting quarterback. I think he's an above average starting quarterback. I do. But if you're putting him in top 5 conversations, you're completely out of your mind. If you think he's better than Matt Stafford, if you think he's better than Jaden Daniels, I don't even know what to do with you, man. I don't even know what to do with you. What are you watching? What football are you watching? Give them the best offensive line maybe in football and top 2 receivers like A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and the best running back in football and the best defense in football and see what happens. That's what I got to say about that. But yeah, Hurts is somewhere in that range of like the 5th to 7th best quarterback in the NFC. He's definitely better than Brock Purdy. They're not in the same tier. All right, let's get into the miscellaneous category, Logan. This is another question about Jalen Hurts. Jax says, here's the Jalen Hurts conversation that doesn't get enough attention and much more important than top 10. Where does Jalen's aura rank among all active starting quarterbacks? 1?
Number 1. It's not
top
even
2
close.
And not 2?
And I think this is why.
That's a factor?
That's why he gets put into these conversations. It's his aura.
It's definitely part of it. It's definitely part of the reason that he gets put in these conversations. Yeah, he probably is number 1 for aura. Joey B, people will bring up, I think his aura is slightly overrated.
True.
I would like to put Josh in these conversations, but it's more of like a whimsical, fun kind of aura. I don't think the consensus
Baker might be too.
High. Baker's got a lot of swag. He does. But Hurts, he's a good-looking guy. He's oozing with aura. Got to give him that. So I think he's top 1. I think he's number 1. Adongus asks, top 10 NBA players with the most aura.
SGA.
Just stop the list there. After that, Jokic.
I mean, Jokic has got aura for sure.
Whoa, that Serbian aura?
I mean, I think he's
that
got
big
aura.
man aura?
Yeah. SGA
He's got sort of like
sure.
a nonchalant
exactly.
thing going for sure. It's SGA and everybody else is just
It's
trying
true.
to get into the party.
True.
Bro. I got to say, I think that Wemby has that unconventional sort of nerdy, understated aura.
I like it.
Like, he's got presence.
It's
Wemby has
endearing.
presence.
It's endearing to me. When Jokic
He's
was
got
goofing,
dignity, and dignity can be aura.
when Jokic was goofing on him for reading a book pregame,
Yeah, that was awesome. That was fun.
he's studious.
He's studious with it. Who else has aura? I would say Book when he's really got it going, but when Book is off, then the whole like pretty boy.
I would say Tatum that applies too. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think
Ja's got
in
aura.
these conversations. I suppose. Evan Mobley has dignity. He's got to be up there. Donovan Mitchell has aura.
There's got to be somebody we're forgetting about.
Steph has vintage aura. Steph does.
LeBron.
So there you go.
LeBron
We've thrown out about 10
actually,
names.
LeBron's number 1.
No, he's not.
It's LeBron, dude.
Yeah, he's the GOAT, not of aura, though. He's goofy, bro. He's drawn Bart Simpson. Saying, haha, I just doodled something. He's a goofy individual. He's up too late watching Looney Tunes, or up early watching Tom and Jerry, I mean. No.
Up
LeBron
late.
is not in these conversations.
Up late watching Tom and Jerry before school tomorrow.
Ridiculous, bro. Ridiculous. Speaking of Donovan Mitchell, and speaking of aura, Aura King asks, will Donovan Mitchell hold his meet-off winner spot or be dethroned by another candidate? I think his own teammate, Evan Mobley, could get him.
Y'all need some help, man.
Who?
Y'all need to go to church and repent.
It's a good question. I'm going to say Evan Mobley is an underdog, dark horse candidate to win the Cavs locker room meet-off. But he's not going to be showy about it. He's not going to be, oh, look at my schwans. Just when the moment comes, just know that he's got it like that. Samuel asks, if Logan and Carson were both a foot taller, who would be their NBA comps? I'm going to modify this.
Yeah.
I'm going to say if we were both 6 inches taller, because if I were a foot taller, I'd be Zach Edey.
Well, let's say if we were average NBA height, I think that's the best way to do this. If we were both.
But I play like a big, bro.
I also play like a guard. So let's say I was 6'4", 6'3".
Let's give ourselves 6 inches. So We can put you
I'd be 6'6".
somewhere between 6'5", 6'6". I'll be 6'10". I'm 6'3" and 3/8, but I guarantee you on an NBA roster I'd be listed at 6'4", so I'm 6'10" in NBA height. I'm Isaiah Hartenstein. That's who I am. That's who I play like. I exist offensively to knock down little floaters and push shots and set screens and occasionally make reads as a passer and spot cutters and whatnot, and then play hard defensively and rebound as well as I can. And maybe if you leave me wide open from three and I've got time to load up, I'll stretch the floor every once in a while. That's my game.
I kind of change depending on what my role needs to be within my team. Like, if I have a go-to scorer, I'll play point if I need to be. But I'd say, like, my probably closest comp is, I feel like I handle and I play make more than this guy. But Dalton Connect, I guess, just like most of my points come from off-ball movement. I mean, honestly, I'm like clearance Steph, but like super budget.
Chill now. Chill.
If
let's move that to a Buddy Hield.
No.
You're Steph. Cool.
The guy that people compare me most often to is Jalen Brunson, but because I'm lefty, no, people tell me, they're like, well, I get Caruso. Caruso's number one. Well, because I walk in and they go,
yeah. Oh God, sorry. Yeah. Sorry, there's a very bright reflective surface that appeared on my screen all of a sudden.
King Neptune. Caruso and Brunson are the guys I get the most, but it's mostly because just like footwork and floaters and shit.
Interesting.
Used to be Luke Kennard, but I'm better now, bruh.
Used to be Luke Kennard, but he's upgraded, he says. I'm Isaiah Hartenstein. I feel pretty confident.
I'm from Rashawn Holmes, bruh. Been in the lab.
Yeah, well, Rashawn Holmes was back in the day. I mean, it's just the push shot, the floater is the defining aspect of my game. The one thing that I do that is different from Hartenstein is I post up, but Hartenstein for sure could.
There's just like no small guards with a
NBA if you're not that
smooth
good.
Lefty baby hook in a a triple threat game.
Real. Well, Xavier Simpson maybe.
Sure.
I do shoot a lot of hook shots. That's another defining aspect of my game. Can't guard it, baby. The face of the internet asks, why is Logan bald? For the longest time, I didn't know he was, and when it was revealed to me, I got really scared. Oh, God.
Well, originally, a long time ago when Carson and I lived together, the first time I went bald is because I wanted to get a fade, but I didn't want to pay any money for it. So Carson and I, we tied a shoelace around my head, and I told him to fade up to the line.
I got his shit right, bro. I lined him up clean.
It was the worst haircut of all time, and so I had no other option but to shave my whole head. And then after I did that, I realized I have what is known as male pattern baldness. It's a genetic thing, and some men are like insecure that they're bald. I'm actually, how like people get plastic surgery and stuff when they they get old and they don't want the wrinkles.
Yeah.
I earned this bald ass head. Right? I got old enough to where I lost my hair. That's called experience. It's called wisdom. And I'm an unk now, so it's all right, man. I think people are like ashamed of being bald. It's all right, man. Be proud.
I always thought you were smited by God. I thought that's why you were bald.
That is true.
I thought you were struck with a lightning bolt.
No, I did get cursed. He cursed.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
There we go.
Look, guys. He's a good-looking young man. And let me tell you something. There's a certain je ne sais quoi with the bald look.
I look better bald. You can tell people, man, when I had hair, bro. Hair was not the wave.
No, it's true. You do look better bald. Carter Moore says, best memory of doing Nerd Sesh so far, and what are your guys' plans for the future? Love all your stuff, so I hope you guys keep on rising. Thank you, Carter. Best memory, Logan.
There's a lot of good ones.
I faded you up.
What is my best memory with you, bro? Honestly, anytime, well, this isn't a Nerd Sesh memory, but anytime we got to play basketball together for sure, bro. Just because.
Super romantic.
I don't know. Carson and I have really good, chemistry and just feel with each other when we're on the court. We had a nasty two-man game sometimes, so.
Real.
Anytime we got to hoop for sure, honestly, just living together, bro, that shit was hype. I miss you, bro. I miss being able to chill with my boy in person.
Even though we talk for 15 hours a week.
I still be missing Carson, though.
Real. Same here, buddy. Okay, my favorite Nerd Sesh memory specifically, You know, we had a lot of fun at the BDG competition last year, even though we didn't win. But we got to hang out with the pick a side dudes, just Riv and Drew. But they were there. They were on our team. That was really, really fun. Going to Vegas for Summer League, doing shows in the Blue Wire studio, hanging out with Jason and stuff. That was really fun.
Our first playoff run, too, I look back on very fondly as well. Those were a lot of fun.
Yeah, I feel like anything that we get to do in person, like at an event, is really fun. Going to the Super Bowl last year. We didn't actually go to the Super Bowl, but we went to the Super Bowl party for the volume. Got to hang out with the Stay Hot boys. All that stuff to me, that's the best, man. That's the best when you just get to chill with the fellas. Agenda pusher. Carson, can you look into the camera and say, Duval?
Nice.
There you go. Are you happy? Ben, would you rather be kissed on the mouth or on the forehead? Hard or soft? Thank you.
Both, yes.
Yeah, I'm going to say the forehead. Mick Deans, if you were a teacher, would you purchase a George Gervin poster display in your classroom? That's a good question, Mick.
Whew.
I would. But I would also be scared because that could be a harbinger of things to come. No, dude, just because, like, the Iceman poster was so tough. When I pulled up to that classroom, sophomore year of high school, my modern world history class, I said, golly, that is tough. You got the Iceman on your wall. Now, that teacher ended up being a pedophile. So that's where the ethical questions come in. Maybe I could just go with someone else. Maybe I could get, like, a cool David Thompson, like a Skywalker poster. There's got to be some cool version of that. But yeah, maybe I should steer clear. But I just love the Iceman. Bro.
That'd be in poor taste. That'd be in poor taste.
All right. I guess you're right. Liam, which warlock and or necromancer is responsible for Logan's revival circa 48 BC? Logan, this one's for you.
I need a dictionary.
Necromancer would be somebody to rise the dead, bring them back to life. Who did that for you circa 48 BC?
God did, I guess, bro.
God did. That's hard as hell. Unhelpful NBA stats. How did you write the Ode to Odom song? I really just got in the studio and started spitting, bro. That's what's crazy. I just put pen to paper.
You sound like Lil Baby.
Out of it. Well, we have a lot in common, me and Lil Baby. But we got to get out another track this year, huh? When was the last time I put out a track? The Stay Hot diss track? It's been too long.
It was the #1 song in the world.
In the world. That was after the Kendrick Drake beef. So when was that? When did that all start? That was close to a year ago, right? Yeah, all right. We're due for another song.
Kendrick inflated those numbers, though, dude. I think Greg Oden should probably sue you for doing
You're going to be
the same
implicated
thing,
in the lawsuit. Just so you know. Yeah. Noah Turner, what that thing do?
Show him.
I'll speak for myself. That thing be thangin'. That thing be thangin'. I won't say anything more than that.
Prove it.
Bro, chill. Just for once in your life, chill just a little bit. Appreciate you guys for all your questions. We got to a lot. We also weren't able to get to a lot, so I'm sorry if we couldn't answer your question, but you guys asked a bunch, which is great. Super fun. So hope you've enjoyed the All-Star Weekend. Hope you enjoyed a little break from the NBA action, but of course, we're still here, baby, and we'll be back and better than ever when basketball comes back and even before then. So if you want more of our content, it's all on our YouTube channel, all of our full NBA and NFL shows. You can also find our video essays, video breakdowns on our YouTube channel where we dive into the film, go more in depth on one specific topic. You can also listen to the podcast across all audio platforms. You can follow us across social, TikTok and Instagram at NerdSesh, Twitter at @nerd_sesh. And you can join our Discord if you want. The link to that is at the link in our link tree across our social media bios. You can also check out our merch. That is linked in our link tree and at breakingtea.com. So with that, as always, appreciate you guys. I've been Carson Brabber.
I've been Logan Camden.
And this was Nerd Sesh.